YouTube in just a few seconds. Okay, we're live stream.
Okay,
All right, let me, I'm letting more people in. Give me 1 second, okay?
Sure.
Got it. Got it.
Got your hands full there, Doris.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're up to 19.
Okay, we are
Okay.
ready.
all right. Everybody please stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
I
allegiance
pledge allegiance
to the flag
Flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so this is the April 7th meeting, 5 o'clock of the Harbor Committee in Sag Harbor Village. Present on the Harbor Committee, we have John Parker, Lily Fell, Will Sharp, myself, Mary Ann Eddy. And we also have Chip Voorhees, who's our consultant, and Liz Vale is sitting in for Fred Thiel this evening as the legal counsel to the committee. We have minutes, just 1 month. How lovely is that? Have you all been able to look at these? John, I don't think you reviewed them, did you?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Can we take a moment, if you haven't had a chance to review these, so that we could accept them and move on?
Yes.
Lily, have you had a chance? You need a little more time? Lily, your audio might not be on.
Just finishing them up.
Okay. Will, how's it going? Lily, you ready? Will Sharp? What happened to Will Sharp?
Okay.
You good?
Yeah.
And thank you. And John Parker, you ready?
Yes.
Who's practicing their piano?
I was waiting.
I didn't know you could hear that. My children are taking lessons. I'll
Oh, no. Oh, good for them.
It's good background music.
Yes.
Waiting.
All right. Are we ready?
Yes.
I don't have any comments, additions, deletions, changes. Anybody else want to offer any changes to the minutes as they're written? Okay, may I have a motion to accept the minutes from the March 3rd, 2022 Harbor Committee meeting?
I'll move.
I'll
Thank you.
second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Is there anybody from the floor who would like to address the Harbor Committee from the public? Doris, do you see any hands?
I am looking on the list. I do not see any hands.
Okay. So we can move on to decisions, and we have quite a few decisions here. Now, Chick, I know you sent them to us ahead of time, but perhaps you'd just like to give us a couple of highlights as to what decisions we're going to be voting on here. The first one
Sure,
I
I think-
see,
We'll go down through the agenda if that's okay.
Yep.
Mary.
perfect,
And Brant is going to help me out. He has been following and assisting. So I'm going to do the first two and he'll do the second two. And then I'll finish up the fifth one. So we had a lot of activity at last month's meeting.
we did.
Which is always good. Give me 1 second here. So the first one looks like it's 29 Harding Terrace.
Correct.
Correct.
I'll share my screen. This will be visible. Trying to make it a little bigger. So you certainly recall this one. This is on the east side of Harding Terrace, closest to Little Northwest Creek. It is an existing structure. We did have a prior pending permit, and this has been fully redesigned now so that everything is within the existing footprint of the existing structure, and they're adding an additional floor. They're also adding a significant buffer. While there's really no opportunity for buffer on the east, they have expanded the considerably so that it has a good square footage. And I'll just go through the permit. We have the project setting, which we're all familiar with. The elements of the project are these 7 items, and they are installing an IA system, which is great. They're also installing stormwater dry wells, a path through the buffer, and very importantly, the 4,245 square foot buffer. So the background is consistent with the opening introduction, and the basic findings are that the buffer's, a good step on a property that does not have a covenanted buffer now. It acknowledges the walkway, that they're adding the 3rd floor, and basically that it meets the statutory requirements for the permit. It's a type 2 action under seeker. It is consistent with the LWRP. Should it apply? It really doesn't on this property. And we have the conditions of approval, which acknowledge the basic elements, the installation of the IA system. There is protection for diamondback terrapin. Just in the planting area, we don't really expect any issues or impact to the species there. If they are removing trees, we acknowledge that there's a clearing limitation unless the DEC authorizes it otherwise. And then some standard conditions regarding silt fence for protection.
Chick, can you hang on for a minute? What did you
Sure,
say
sorry.
about clearing?
Just that if there are any trees to be removed, and I'm not even sure there are, so this may be overprotective, but there is a window that the DEC allows clearing because of habitat for the northern long-eared bat. That's from December 1st to February 28th in Suffolk
Right.
County.
Right.
There is an opportunity to seek relief from that, depending on the actual habitat assessment.
But they won't remove any trees unless we've discussed that and it's been approved on the plan, correct?
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a overkill, but it's good notification just in case.
Okay,
Item G, it's not Northwest Creek, it's Little Northwest Creek.
Good point. We'll make that edit. And I'll
Different creek.
Doris tonight or tomorrow morning. Thank you. You're absolutely right, Will. Pick that up. We also have the planting performance requirement under N, as well as covenanting the buffer area, and we did attach the instructions for the filing of the covenants to the satisfaction of the attorney. And we've referenced the most up-to-date plans. I don't know if anyone from Land Use Ecological Services is here, but it was authorized at the last meeting. And I put that before you for consideration of approval.
any comments or questions of Chick?
I have a couple. One, I want to go back over the tree clearing, especially after what we've recently seen. Just to make sure. Like, well, you said there's a limit, Chick, about the amount of trees that can be taken down.
It's strictly with respect to the northern long-eared bat, which is a threatened species, and the DEC has guidance for not clearing trees between December 1st and February 28th. So we wanted to recognize that kind of as a notification. But you know, they're building just an additional story on an existing house. And I can pull up plans, but my recollection is there really is no clearing of trees.
Yeah.
And I don't know if anyone from the applicant is here to comment. And if you wish, I can take a moment and pull up the plan. But my recollection is there's no clearing. And
Chick, if you could pull up the plan, there's a question I have, if you could pull up the plan.
And I have a second question. I just like to, one comment, because I was there the other day and there's a nice buffer of, and I don't remember, can't remember, I'm sorry, I didn't pay attention if it was bayberry or what is the other one? Inkberry. I noticed that was nice. I hope that's not going
Bayberry,
to get
beach
cleared
plum.
out.
yeah, there's really nothing shown. Everything is, the buffer is shown on here as the stippled area, 4,245 square feet, non-disturbance. I'll bring up the planting plan as well, but everything is within the existing footprint of the house, and anything else is just supplementing the existing buffer.
And then I also noticed, and I sent an email out, I saw they were doing some sort of construction around the house, and I don't know if that's the proposed water line, but did anyone get my email?
I
No,
saw it, and my response was that, you know, that's something that should be brought up to the building department. We do have this pending permit tonight, and if there are activities taking place, you know, it certainly should be covered by the permit. But I was not aware that they had started work or what they're doing, and that should probably be something for the building inspector to look at.
Is there somebody from the applicant that's here at the meeting?
Can you all hear me? It's Kelly Rosado. Can you hear me?
Hey, Kelly.
Hi there.
yeah,
Hi. Sorry, I kept trying to comment and I didn't want to interrupt anybody. How's everybody tonight?
good.
Good.
Good. So two things with regard to the trees. There are shown on the survey, I believe, 2 trees, oaks in the front yard that will need to be removed for installation of the sanitary system. But that is called out on the survey.
Right here, it's in,
And
and there are arrows showing location of 2 oak trees to be removed. If you can see that.
and then
larger.
with regard to the, the buffer and the existing vegetation, I know the buffer plan's got a lot of hatching and colors, but there is some natural vegetation existing within the buffer that will remain. There won't be any clearing or removal of vegetation in the buffer. It will just be adding the native species to the buffer area where they're needed.
Okay, because there's a nice buffer and it would be a shame if they ripped it out to replant a buffer.
Oh yeah, no, that's
Yeah,
not,
I mean-
yeah.
It's just
Not
not,
the
I
intent here,
believe it's-
Lily.
Below.
okay.
On the plan, the area to remain, vegetated area to remain.
So that yellow area on this plan is the area that's going to remain. And anything else, there's some existing lawn areas and they're supplementing it. This is a grassed area. There's some landscape features. And anything north of the wetlands, of course, remains completely intact. That's off the plan here, but there's no activity there. So it's just supplementing the plantings and removing 2 oak trees in the front as it's on the survey.
Okay, and what's going on with the building or the building around the perimeter of 29 Harding Place right now, or Harding Terrace?
Well, that's what I think we don't know, but I think that's a building inspector question. I mean, I think
Yeah,
that,
I'm not aware of anything going on, so I don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry.
Well,
yes, sir.
if we are concerned about containing the footprint of the house, I will just say that there is structure there, concrete formwork that has been poured that is
Really?
not reflected in the drawings, and it is outside the footprint of the house. And that needs to be looked at. It's substantial.
Well, I don't think we go forward with this permit tonight, pending the outcome of what that shows.
I just,
Wouldn't that be a building department issue, though? I mean,
if there's a, and I'm just speaking for myself, and maybe I shouldn't because I recuse myself on this. So correct me, counsel.
Yeah, that's a problem. I'm sorry, if you're recused on this, you shouldn't be speaking
Okay.
on the matter.
Okay.
Okay, but let me pick up. This is,
These are the photographs that Lily sent today.
well, that definitely looks like that's outside the present footprint. So to me, Kelly, I think there is a problem because what's represented to us and what we have permitted is not what's reflected in reality anymore.
okay. I just said I was not aware anything's going on. I'll speak to the owner and find out what it is. I have no idea.
So Liz, how do we get, I think a stop work order on this? How do I call the building inspector, or is there?
No,
a formal-
I can send an email to the building inspector, just alerting him to inspect the property and make sure what's being done there complies with any permits that have been issued to date. I don't know if you issued any prior permits on this matter.
Not
We
the-
have not, no.
Oh, okay,
No,
so,
Nothing's been issued to, so I mean, if any work is going on.
yeah,
and
that's a
not-
problem.
Not work that complies with the application, but any work.
Right.
I mean, that's a problem.
To the extent that it's within the jurisdiction of the wetland boundary, the wetlands, and it doesn't have proper permits from this board, that's a problem, so.
And the
Right.
whole area is within the
Yeah,
jurisdiction.
Liz, the entire property is subject to jurisdiction.
So yeah, this is an issue.
Yep.
And they'll have to amend, obviously they'll have to, we'll have to refer to the building inspector, he'll have to take action, they'll have to amend their plans and update their surveys to show as-built construction as well.
Well,
board
I'm
review.
not, no, I think the option is they take out whatever they're doing there.
Well,
Because,
that's not before you, but that will be a determination of the board after they've reviewed whatever as-built surveys come before you. That's like an ultimate determination that you make after everything's presented to you, Madam Chairwoman.
okay.
Not
all
right now.
So they will send us surveys with, okay,
Yeah,
we'll see what
Kelly.
happens here.
Kelly a chance to speak to her client, find out what's going on.
right. Yeah,
Close the loop with the building department, make sure everything's on the up and up.
and I will send an email about this to the
Okay.
building inspector.
Well,
Really,
Liz, how
thank you. I
exciting.
I responded to your email, but I wasn't sure that that was this site. Thank you.
Thank you, Lily.
You're welcome. Just keeping an eye on things.
One
Walking the
advantage,
dog.
one advantage of walking a dog every day.
So what, I have 188 Redwood. Is that what you see as next, Chip?
Yes, that's next on the agenda. We can cover that one. And give me 1 second, but I'll start some remarks. As you recall, and we do have representatives, Haley Willis, and I believe Josh is on Schwartz, I should say, on his iPad.
Yeah, I'm here.
So this is one that we worked on extensively. The applicant was very accommodating, looked at all the alternatives, certainly met the letter and spirit and intent of Chapter 285-9. In examining this, we certainly did not want a hardened shoreline structure. So this permit reflects the most current plans that involve an inland retaining wall, an area of planting seaward of the inland retaining wall, and a rock revetment that makes the transition across the intertidal zone. There's been a lot of discussion, so I don't want to belabor this, but it is a 24-foot revetment. There is high marsh plantings above the revetment, as I said, and the upland retaining wall. And there's already a 30-foot buffer on the property, but they're expanding it an additional 20 feet to make the full 50-foot buffer, which is excellent. And they're also armoring the existing 16-foot return. So these are all the things that we were looking for. All of the essential findings are consistent with our discussions. Even in D here, after much discussion and coordination, the applicant proposed what I just described. This also talks about meeting the requirements of 285-9, that it's a type 2 action, consistent with the LWRP, and all of the necessary conditions reflecting what we've talked about, with erosion control as needed, protection of the roadways, performance for the planting areas, and covenanting the buffer. This reflects all of the plans as prepared by Costello Marine, which were reviewed and approved for us to prepare this permit at the last meeting. And this is before you if you have any questions and for your consideration of adopting a permit.
I just want to thank you for your hard work on this. I know that you worked with the applicant extensively and it came out with a great result. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I think we all participated, but you also gave me some latitude to work with them between meetings, and I think that was extremely productive. And in each case, we reported back to the committee month by month progress. So I think the outcome is very good. And Haley and Mr. Schwartz, Haley Willis and Mr. Schwartz are here as well. You know, they certainly deserve a lot of credit for working with us.
All right. Any other questions or comments for Chick on this permit? Okay. May I have a motion? So there's only 3 of us now voting. So it's Lily, John Parker, and myself. May I have a motion from one of you and the second from the others so that we can move forward to a vote?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. John, John Parker?
I said I would say, oh, am I muted possibly?
You are.
Yeah, you were muted. Can you just second the motion?
I should be unmuted.
You are now,
Oh,
right?
John, we hear you.
All right. My machine was saying I was unmuted before, but anyway, I'll second the motion.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
I,
Okay.
I think I
Thank
owe
you.
you an apology. I thought I was screen sharing, but it looks as though I wasn't.
No, we just kept looking at you. That was fine.
Thank you.
All right. So now we're going to change faces, correct?
Yeah, hi, say hi to Brant Reiner. Here's the draft permit and take it away.
Good evening, everyone. Pleasure to be before you tonight. I'll be presenting the permit for 23 Harding Terrace. This is a reno addition to an existing residential structure. It involves some pretty extensive renovations that the board has reviewed very thoroughly, along with the installation of a 50-foot non-disturbance, non-fertilization buffer area. The background is that this project is located on Little Northwest Creek, and it is adjacent to Sag Harbor Bay. Our findings are such that the project is consistent with the statutory requirements of Chapter 285, and that is a Type 2 action. We looked at waterfront consistency review, and we found it to be consistent with the local waterfront revitalization program. And the conditions of the approval are such that the applicant will be aware that they must abide by the 50-foot non-disturbance non-fertilization buffer requirements. Diamondback terrapins have been known to be in this area, and the applicant must be aware that there is certain time frames to be sensitive to the terrapins. Going back to Chick's point on a previous application, if disturbance of trees is required, the applicant is required to adhere to the DEC's clearing restrictions, which limits them to disturbance of trees between December 1 and February 28th. And all of the other conditions are standard to permit requirements, and we believe that this is a permit is in order for the board's approval tonight.
So Chick, or Blair, is it?
Brant.
I'm sorry.
Brant.
B-R-A-N-T,
sorry.
Brant.
Right, Brant. So don't we usually have like a final survey that shows all the trees? So I know this came up with, the one on Glover Street, and Chick, you did a great job of explaining that. But when we approve a final survey, that includes trees that are to remain. Is that correct?
So this application, the survey that was provided does not indicate the location of the trees.
Okay.
I do have the survey in front of me. I don't know if Chick, if you're pulling it up as well.
I think I'm sharing, this looks like
That's the site plan.
Chick's plan, and I also have a survey here.
Yeah. So this,
Reorient.
you can see the site is fairly well disturbed.
Okay.
I'd be hard pressed to believe that there are any trees of significance, although it's hard to determine without looking at site photographs. But you can see how there's extensive paths and driveways and hard structure, pools, patios. And my understanding is that all of the work will be maintained within the footprint of the existing structures. And that this is more of a renovation to the existing house with the proposal of the additional mitigation where necessary.
So is this wishful thinking on my part that we could actually like capture trees and make that part of the permit that they're to remain, or is that going beyond what we are entitled to do?
I'll let Chick chime in here, but I don't think that's written into the code. I think that's something that if the board is wanting to consider as part of future applications, that there needs to be
Right.
discussions with the village board and Liz as to how you go about
Right.
doing that.
You can also
Yes.
always negotiate with the property owner, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
During the process, you could tell them you want to keep these trees and have them marked on the survey, et cetera.
Right.
On the architect's plan, it looks to me as though there's
There
a
is.
tree here, and it's certainly not proposed to be removed. We do have jurisdiction to 150 feet, but we generally focus on areas 50 feet from bluffs and 50 feet from wetlands for buffer restoration. But again, this really is minor activity shown in this
Right.
area on an existing structure. And I think, maybe part of the confusion is this whole thing. If you remove a tree, the northern long-eared bat needs to be protected. There's a window for clearing, but I'm not aware of any clearing with this one as Brent, the site is mostly disturbed.
All right, so I don't have anything to say about this particular application. I think the time is past for that. But I think as we go forward, I think we should do as Liz suggested, which is if there's significant trees there that we think should remain on the property, that we negotiate with the owners to have them covenanted in the permit.
I
Does that sound
totally
like a-
agree.
We'll absolutely keep an eye out for that on all reviews and make sure that we make that part of our checklist and
Yeah,
briefing to the board, and also ask the applicants as they present these. But we'll keep that in mind throughout our reviews.
okay. I know sometimes it's been part of the discussion, but it's not every time, and I think it should be. All right, any other questions, comments on this particular application? I think
No.
that'd be Lily. Will, have you recused yourself on this application as well?
Yes.
Okay, so John, any questions, comments?
No, we reviewed this but previously, and I think it's fine.
Okay, so may I get a motion from one of you and a second from the other to approve this permit?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Brent, are you up for this next one?
Yes, I am. 14 Cove Road.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, can I just make a comment? I'm sorry to break in. The trees and landscaping generally fall under the HPARB.
Whoever's talking should,
That's Steve?
Yeah, it's Mr. Williams.
Yes, it's me. So
Right.
Hi, Mr. Williams.
that was just an
Right.
FYI. That's why it's not consistent on your side. We're supposed to put the landscaping plans, tree removal and that sort of thing that falls under exterior aesthetics. So that falls under us.
yeah, but I think as Liz said, it's open for discussion when we have an open application. If there's something that we think is really significant on the property, is
Mhm.
that correct?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is.
So I
and
don't-
Yeah, it's one thing. The ARB certainly has jurisdiction over aesthetic portions of the property for sure. The landscaping review is limited in the code for the ARB as well. And certainly this board has the right to look at trees as well, to the extent that they would aid in any buffering or otherwise.
okay. Okay, so
Up to
Brent, you want to
14
continue
Cove.
with
Yes.
14 Cove Road?
Sure. 14 Cove Road is an application for a proposed dock. It's a 4x56 fixed pier catwalk with open grade decking. It meets all of the general standards, no treated materials. There will be, as part of the application, the repair of any of an existing bluff stairway to connect to the catwalk. And there will be revegetation of any disturbed areas as part of the proposed work. This is fairly consistent with design standards for this type of construction. We did look at the wetland buffer plans, the dock plans, and we found them to be consistent. The design has also been approved by the DEC and is consistent with their standards. There will be a non-disturbance, non-fertilization buffer area landward of the wetland line, as was previously approved by this board in 2021. And the application as designed currently meets the statutory requirements of 285-9. This is a type 2 action. It's found to be consistent with the LWRP, Coastal Consistency Review. And I feel the application is in order for approval by the board tonight.
Okay.
Billy Mack is here and Aaron may have also come in. This was submitted by First Coastal.
Yes, I'm sorry, I just saw them come in.
And we should probably point out, at least for the applicant, grant this condition number 4. We were.
Yes, this is something that I did want to
ahead.
bring to the board's attention. We think that it's helpful for the board consistently to demonstrate that we're going to look for chalks to keep the floating docks off the bay bottoms during periods of extreme low tides, especially when we cannot demonstrate that there's at least 2.5 feet of water. So as a condition of this approval, we have made a note that the contractor should install chocks attached to the piles so that the float will not rest on the cove bottom.
Did somebody say that the applicant was here or a representative?
Yeah, hey everybody, Billy Mack, First Coastal. Hope everybody's doing great. I noted that suggestion and would abide by it. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, comments from Lily? Will, I think you're back in action on this one. John? Okay, may I have a motion to accept this permit as written?
I'll
I'll
make
make a
that
motion.
I'll second.
Okay,
second.
Will?
Second.
Right, thank you. All in favor? Aye.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Will.
Have a great evening.
Good night, Billy.
Thank you, Billy.
Thanks, Billy.
Who's handling 28 Long Pond Road?
Coming up. So this was also authorized at the last meeting for us to prepare a permit. I'll bring up the draft permit for you in 1 second. That should be visible. 28 Long Point Road. I believe Mike Shiano is here as well. But everything was really worked out at the last meeting in March. We have the dimensions and basic elements of the dock and the walkway. You might recall the cross section and the plans that were prepared. This one specified chocks to be used in the application itself, so that was good. The background is also consistent with the introduction, and this just indicates that we looked at all the essential requirements under Chapter 285, and it is consistent with the standards for issuing a permit under 285-9. It's a type 2 action, consistent with the LWRP, and the basic conditions acknowledging what is being permitted here. Silt fence if needed. This is really just a dock, so we do want to make sure that any erosion control measures are incorporated as needed. And we've referenced the plans that Mike's office prepared and are most up to date. There was a comparison to existing profile view, cross-section, etc. So again, this was authorized for March to be prepared tonight. We have a representative of the applicant if there's any questions, and I'm here. I put this to you for consideration of approval.
Questions, comments? We spent considerable amount of time on this at one point. Lily, John, Parker, Will?
No.
All right. May I have a motion to accept the proposal, or I'm sorry, the decision is written by Nelson Pope and Voorhees?
I'll move.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
All right.
Great.
Thanks,
Okay,
everyone. Have a good night.
yeah, thank you.
You too, Mike.
Okay, so we now, because this is a special evening and we have Chris Gobler's report on the water quality sampling that was done, that's scheduled at 6 o'clock. And we have like 20 minutes yet to go. So Chick, you might be the best one to know, or maybe Liz. We have two things that we could do in the next 20 minutes. I don't know that we can do them both. You tell me. We have a March 21 assessment of Sag Harbor water quality. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Sorry. Take that back. We have one thing. We have a consistency review for local law amending Chapter 300 to allow the passenger ferry special exception use on Long Wharf. I don't know how much discussion is going to be involved with that. And the other thing we have is the issue of the lead agency determination for 100 Glover Street.
So Mary Ann, this is Chick. It's totally up to the committee. And, I'll just say that we do have a couple of applicants here on some pending projects. I don't know the time required for them, but that might be something to consider as well. It's under old business.
Yeah, I don't really want to get started on those and then have to stop
Got it.
for at 6 o'clock or as close to 6 o'clock as we can make it. So can you recommend, or Liz, how involved is this for the passenger ferry? Liz, do you know?
Chick prepared the review for it, not me, but it's a local law adding the passenger ferry use back into the zoning code as a special exception use permit approval.
Okay. So Chick, do you want to talk us through this and maybe we can wrap this up in 17, 18 minutes?
Sure. And I may have some reinforcements coming. This was done.
Would you like to put that off until later?
No, well, John Ellsworth, whose name has been appearing, was standing by for a text, so he may be able to come on. But I'll just explain that this is a village board initiative. There is a draft of a consistency analysis, and attached to that is the resolution. It's under attachment A. And I hope that was circulated as part of your package. I'll pull it up right now. There was a memo prepared for Harbor Committee's consideration, and this was at the request of the Village Board of Trustees. So it explains exactly what's taking place here. Have you joined us, or shall I continue?
Who are you speaking to?
John Ellsworth.
Oh.
Why don't you unmute? John, you can unmute. So John is on the staff at NPV, and he worked with Kathy at the request of the village board to prepare this review. And if he's unmuted, John, the recommendation is here on the screen. We don't have John's voice.
I'm asking John to unmute right now. John?
Doesn't work.
Well, John, if you can get on, you can bail me out, but let's not hold things up. So there will be a public hearing on this in the future. It's an amendment to allow an application to be made for a special exception approval by the Board of Trustees for a seasonal passenger ferry, which would operate between Greenport and Sag Harbor. It's proposed by Hampton Jitney in a pending application to Suffolk County for a 5-year franchise agreement. And, you know, there's not a lot of LWRP policies that apply to this, but, you know, it certainly is a water-dependent use, and it certainly promotes access to the waterway and use of the waterway, as well as intermodal transportation opportunities. So the attachment includes the notice of hearing and the changes to the local law. Liz may know a little more about that, but it is attached. We also have the coastal assessment form and went through the basic description and the basic policies, finding it to be consistent. So that, as I said, is prepared at the village board's request, and either I or if John has audio, we can try and answer any questions. But we know that under the Coastal Consistency Code, the Harbor Committee does make a recommendation on these to the village board. And our thought was that if you're in agreement, you may consider this to find it to be consistent.
And this is just adding it back, the use back into the code, because it was in the code before. Fred was the village attorney when it was first introduced to the code, but it was only temporarily in the code. It was actually removed after a year because it was a pilot program. So this is actually just putting the use back in the code, and the actual application for the permit to do this passenger ferry for the Hampton Jitney between Greenport and Sag Harbor will be a separate application for the special permit itself. And that requires a public hearing as well. This is on for public hearing before the village board this Tuesday, coming up Tuesday.
Right, so that application doesn't come to Harbor Committee. We're just doing a coastal consistency review on the change in the code.
Correct.
And the only reason that the temporary code back in 2012, 13, whatever, wasn't made permanent was just because that wasn't the nature of a temporary code adjustment at that time. Why did it not become a permanent part?
I think because it was only a pilot program. All ferries are actually regulated by the county under New York state law. And I think the county had approved a pilot program for 1 year to try it. I don't believe it was for a 5-year permit like this. So.
Okay.
Well, I also think the pilot program was considered to be a failure at the time. But I do have a question for Liz or Chick. My understanding of the timeline here is that there was this prior pilot program, and then there was a reconfiguration of Long Wharf, and we had a consistency review at the Harbor Committee regarding the reconfiguration of Long Wharf, its new use, and the changes there. Some of those changes were to make it more amenable to use by the public, to use for fishing, whatever recreation at the end of the dock. And one of the conditions that I recall was that boats would not be docked at the end of Long Wharf. I believe, and you can correct me on this, but is this a proposal that this ferry will dock at the end of Long Wharf?
It's off of Long Wharf. I don't know exactly where on Long Wharf.
I believe the answer is yes, but it's not like docking, like tie it up and walk away. It's like it comes in for 10 or 12 minutes and people exit, people get on and it leaves. The one that I find is more of an issue there, John, is Kisses, which has been lashed up to the east side of the dock, and it comes in and stays for months. And that question that you just brought up has gone through my mind a couple of times with that. I find that to be something we should look at.
Well, I agree with you, Mary. I'm just, and again, I was told that this, I think I have this correct, that the boat was going to dock 5 or 6 times a day. I don't know how long it's going to be at Long Wharf, but I do remember that we had a long discussion and we had a consistency review issue, and we were told that boats would not be docking at the end of Long Wharf. And I didn't take that to mean, permanently tied up, I took that to mean wouldn't be docking at all. In other words, whether it's a ferry or whether it's a yacht, or whether it's for 20 minutes or whether it's for 5 hours or 5 days, that the end of Long Wharf would be used for other forms of recreation and would not be used for boat docking. I mean, somebody fishing off the end of Long Wharf, I would imagine would have to stop fishing when the ferry docks. I think it's a question here of is it consistent with uses we've prior approved? Is use of the ferry by some people, does that override use of the end of Long Wharf by others? And especially when we've had a redesign of the Long Wharf specifically to facilitate other types of uses other than boats docking there.
So, John, where would we find exactly what you're talking about in terms of the discussion and how we approved the plans for Long Wharf? Liz, where would we find those?
I mean, I think you have to look at, this is the Greenport landing site, Chick, that you're sharing,
Yeah.
or
I'm
that's
just
someone
looking for
sharing. So
stuff
we
I
need
may
the,
have
we need
on.
the one for Long Wharf.
Okay,
I
There
mean,
we go.
And we
this
also
is it right
certainly,
here.
you could see how big the boat is as well. And I mean, I don't believe it would obstruct the entire end of Long Wharf. But that being said, that's something you can look at once we get that information if you have it here.
I mean, there's different ways of docking, and I don't know whether this is going to dock the bow or stern of the boat to Long Wharf, or whether it's going to be the side of the boat.
No,
It looks
it's head
wording.
it's head and tail.
John, this shows it quite well. And this is that other location, as Liz pointed out. So this is at the end of Long Wharf. There's a, and you can see my screen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
and this was a 100-foot boat.
I don't see the dimensions of the boat. John has been texting me, so I'll report if I get information, but this shows that it's the same location that was used before, that it will dock for 15 minutes every 2 hours. And it's head in, it's bow in. There's a picture of the vessel here and a diagram of the end of Long Wharf. So that's what I have. This is so these look like the dimensions, 47 feet 6 inches by 17 and a half feet. If that answers your question.
So you said the length was 47 feet on the boat?
Yeah.
47 and a half by 17 and a half.
Okay.
I mean, consistently last summer, there was a charter boat, Luna, that was docked quite a bit. I mean, at the end of the dock that would pick up and drop off passengers. And that came in, I think it was port's starboard side in, and that boat's 60 some odd feet long and sat there for quite a bit.
John, I share your same, I share your concern. I'm not so sure that I'm as concerned about this ferry, coming in for whatever it is, 10, 12 minutes every 2 hours, as the boats that come in and tie up and stay for a very long time and really do block the view shed. So Liz, is this the last opportunity we're going to have to look at this?
Yeah, I think so, because it's on for public hearing and then hopefully for adoption on Tuesday, depending on what the board's pleasure is. This is not approving the actual ferry. This is approving the use, a ferry use, which would be inserted back into the code because there's no ferry use permitted in the code.
I would like to go
Passenger
on
ferry
record.
use only. Passenger ferry.
I would like to go on record saying that absolutely the wharf should be able to accommodate ferry use. I mean, this is public transportation that might really be a great thing. It might be a disaster. We don't know, but for heaven's sakes, it should be, it's part of the historic legacy of the wharf. There's another question that Lily brought up that might be kind of interesting, is that those guys that tie up at the end of the wharf, they're paying money to do that. That's not a freebie. So what does the trustees, what is their response? Because they're getting a lot of dinero every time somebody ties up, even to the dinghy dock. So has that been accounted for in all of this?
I don't think that there's been a financial analysis, or at least not one that I've seen, how much they are paying us to do that. But I don't know that that really enters into this conversation.
Right.
I do like your comment that this is public transportation. And, you know, there are a lot of people that wouldn't make the trip back and forth except for, you know, the advantage of a ferry and going on a boat ride. But there are some people who would be taking this ferry who otherwise would be driving around. And
yeah, I think it's a wonderful thing. We should have it.
I agree.
all right,
I think let me, if we're going to talk about whether we should have it or not, the pilot study, when this docked before, showed that this was used almost as a one-way. In other words, it was people docking, it was people parking in Sag Harbor in order to go to Greenport. It was not occurring very much the other way around. The vast majority was here. It contributed to traffic problems in the village, which is one of the worst problems the village had at the height of the season. So, I mean, I think this is inconsistent with most people from Sag. If you're talking about people from Sag Harbor, this is inconsistent with their access, to the water. It's going to be it's going to block navigation, and it's inconsistent with the previous recommendations we've made for the use of Long Wharf. I mean, if we want to go back to allowing ferries, the new London ferry used to dock at Long Wharf, and that's no longer allowed. And I think that any ferry docking here,
that's a car ferry. This is a passenger ferry.
Well, yes, but
yeah.
If you're allowing a ferry, at what point do you say, no, that's too long, or that's cars, et cetera? I think that the ferry use of Long Wharf was eliminated for a reason.
Okay, I think you bring up good points, John, but maybe we vote on it and see what happens.
Well, that's fine.
so John, yeah, because a lot of the things you're talking about are specific to this particular ferry service. And some of the things you said were, I heard different information when I heard them presenting at the village board. So I'm not saying you're wrong. I just heard different stories, but that's a matter of whether or not the Hampton Jitney ferry is allowed to go forward. But I kind of side with Will, and I think I'm hearing Lily say that, the idea of public transportation, and this seems to be a fairly light touch, is a good idea. So if we say no, then the light touch is going to be, thrown out with, as the baby with the bathwater with car ferries. So that wasn't a very articulate, discussion there, but I would like to go forward.
Mary, just one further comment. You're not approving this particular ferry.
That's right.
You're approving the use of Long Wharf for ferries. Liz said
for passenger ferry. It's adding the use back to the code, correct?
Yes, but that use would include the new London ferry docking here as car use. I mean, you're opening it up to that use with larger boats, different types of ferries.
Right, but
we're not limiting it to this ferry.
That's no. If I may, we're not limiting it to this ferry, but it's adding a special permit use for a passenger ferry only at the end of Long Wharf. That's true, but it does require specific review and approval. It's not just granting this use. It's a special permit use, which requires review and approval and a public hearing as well under the law.
At the village board level,
correct? I still think it's opening the door to a use that we've previously decided against. So,
all right. I think I'm ready to vote on this. Would anybody urge me not to close this and ask for a motion on this? Liz, is this a public hearing? Do we have people from the public that can chime in on this or not?
No, I believe it's just your consistency review, right, Chick? So
Yes,
it's not
that's
a
correct,
public
Liz.
hearing, no. There'll be a
Okay.
public hearing though on Tuesday with regard to this before the Village Board of Trustees, if anyone wants to be heard.
Okay. So what exactly is the language, Liz, of the motion that we need to pass? Can
A
you,
motion to adopt the consistency review prepared by Nelson Pope and Voorhees.
Okay. May I have a motion to adopt the consistency review as prepared by Nelson Pope and Voorhees?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
All right.
Opposed?
I'm opposed.
Okay. All right, the motion carries. And it is 6:01. So, good timing. Doris, do you see whether or not the mayor is logged in or and/or Chris Gobler?
I will check
Mr.
right
Gobler
now.
did come in.
I saw Mr.
Dr.
Gobler.
Gobler is here. Several village trustees are here.
Correct.
I'll let you do that, Doris. But I've been admitting some because Doris made me the overseer.
There you go.
Anyone
We
that's
all
come
need an
on, I've admitted.
overseer.
I see iPhones, but I did submit a couple of iPhones.
Can you just ask if the mayor's in attendance? Well, I can do that.
Yes.
Mayor LaRocca, are you on our Harbor Committee meeting at this point? Do you see a hand up?
No, I don't.
Okay. So then what I'm going to do, but you do see Chris Gobler there, right? Chris, you're there?
Damn.
Okay, great. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Dr. Gobler, and he's going to present the findings of the 2021 Sag Harbor Water Quality Initiative, the sampling that was done. Dr. Gobler is the endowed chair of the Coastal Ecology and Conservation Department at the School of Marine and Atmospheric Sciences, and he's also the director of the the Center for Clean Water Technology. I think most of you who are on this call are familiar with Dr. Gobler's work. This is the 4th study that we've done here in Sag Harbor. I think we've paid a lot of attention in previous years and this year again to Havens Beach. We've also been looking consistently at the sewage treatment plant. And this year we've also focused again back on the coves. So Dr. Gobler, please.
Chris, are you presenting? Yes, good. I see you're able to share. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Good to see everyone virtually. And on the one hand, I was lamenting the fact that we're not in person. But on the other hand, when I walked out of my office this evening and saw the weather, it seemed like, well, maybe that's okay. Anyway, it's good to be in touch with all of you and see you all virtually, and I'm happy to be sharing the results of our most recent study for the last year. Just starting out with some quick background, just to get us warmed up, and the idea that all of Long Island is a watershed, all of Sag Harbor is a watershed, and all of the water in the village ends up somehow in our coastal zone or is being extracted for drinking water. There's really only those two fates once it gets into the water table. And as further background, we're aware that over time, it's become abundantly clear that high levels of nitrogen particularly from septic systems, have been seeping from coastal waters, from groundwater into coastal waters and having ill effects on those coastal waters. And that's illustrated in a map like this that shows water quality impairments according to both DEC and federal standards, and also federal scientific or international scientific standards as well, with the occurrence of harmful algal blooms and low oxygen conditions This is from just last summer over a 4-month period. Many of these are harmful algal blooms, which I'll talk about just a bit during this presentation, which is the overgrowth given algal species to a density that has a negative outcome on human health or an aquatic ecosystem. These generally can be in 2 varieties, the kind that are toxic to humans because they make biotoxins, or the type that are just simply harmful to marine life. Another big focus of this study is going to be on indicator bacteria, and those are bacteria that are indicative of fecal contamination in coastal waters, and that will be assessing specifically levels of the contamination and where they may be coming from. And of course, we worry about pathogenic bacteria because, one, there are standards by DEC that dictates where people can and cannot be shellfishing. There also is also a standard by the New York State Department of Health with regard to the levels that are permissible for swimming. And then within the pool of fecal bacteria, there are all sorts of denominations and taxa, that some of which are more or less harmful to others. So beyond just measuring fecal coliform bacteria, which is the standard by which shellfish beds are open and closed in New York, we also perform something known as microbial source tracking. This is using a process called digital PCR to specifically quantify the levels of bacteria that emanate from either deer, birds, humans, dogs, and or small mammals. Just as a quick reminder of some of the past findings that we had, and I'll review some more of these as we go through. But in the past, we've noted high levels of nitrogen, low levels of oxygen, low levels of water clarity, algal blooms, and specifically harmful rust tide blooms, and then also the high levels of fecal coliform bacteria, exceeding some limits in some places. We also previously have determined that nitrogen is the element that's promoting rust tides and algal growth within Sag Harbor. And our nitrogen loading models, which we constructed specifically for the harbor and for the cove, identified for both locations on-site septic systems as being the primary source of nitrogen. And we've looked specifically both in the inner harbor, but also in other locations, and have found high levels of human-derived fecal bacteria in the inner harbor regions, but dogs, small mammals, and birds being more important in areas further away. So moving just right into the motivation for the 2021 study, and I'll have some additional information as I get to each section. The study can actually be broken up into 4 parts, and they're all, each one being crafted to really get at specific, answer specific questions. So there's a specific focal region on Havens Beach, and to understand if specifically the beach is being contaminated by the sump there. Another was to look at fecal bacteria from marinas and from the sewage treatment plant and runoff to understand both levels and sources. There was a little bit of a focus just on general water quality to put things in perspective. And then something a little new for this year is just having a brief look at 3 freshwater bodies in the general vicinity of Sag Harbor. I'll have some more detailed maps in each individual subsection, but I wanted to share this overall map to just give you a sense of precisely where we're focused. So in no particular order, in the lower right, you can see the particular ponds that we're focused on, and I'll bring those up again. For the marine sites, you can see essentially we extended from the outfall of the sewage treatment plant through the inner harbor and then into as far west as the ship ashore marina. And then for Havens Beach, you can see we had a very intense focus on the sump, trying to understand that delivery of material out of the sump into the surface waters, and then also regions further away from that area to understand potential levels of contamination. I'm going to start with the marine sites, and you can see them all here. Although the sewage treatment plant effluent site is not really marine, it's just before it becomes a marine site. So we're again at the Sag Harbor Yacht Club, Windmill Beach, Ship Ashore Marina, and then a site here that I'll call Beacon. That particular site on the very first iteration went into this vault. You can see a ladder going down. There's my student, Alex Anthony. And this area receives water that's being pumped from the low-lying regions across Sag Harbor. You can see some of the regions where it's coming from. Gets pumped into there, and from that chamber, it then flows out into the harbor. So we collected samples from both within the vault and also when the water is flowing out of them. But again, these are the sites we're focused on. So just getting into some data. You can see the time series here was from mid-May till October. And what you can just see is the expected pattern and temperatures here, just giving you the sense that how things flowed from spring to summer to fall, with peaks in temperature occurring in late summer, and all of these sites being approximately the same. You can see a little bit higher temperatures at Ship Ashore, probably because it's influenced by the cove that warms up more so than the harbor waters, and a little bit lower temperature from the Beacon site, hence showing that that's being a separate type of water that's coming into the system. All the sites had fairly similar salinity. You can see some lower levels of salinity coming out of the Beacon site, again, given the evidence that it's the runoff mixing with the marine water, and higher water level, the highest levels being at the yacht. In good news, dissolved oxygen levels look quite good within all sites that we measured. And chlorophyll levels were never too high. This is the NOAA and EPA maximal level you'd want to see, and no exceedances there, so that's good news. We did look for harmful algal blooms. In the spring, we looked for Alexandrium, which makes saxitoxin, and is really one of the more concerning harmful algal blooms you can find out there. And we did find the organism around throughout both May and June, with the highest levels further back, and most consistent levels further back, so being found at Ship Ashore, but then also at the yacht club. Really just those 2 dates, the first dates were the ones I would say would be of greatest concern. But there was no issues with regards to shellfish toxicity, so that's good news. The other harmful algal bloom we looked at thereafter was Dinophysis, which usually overlaps with Alexandrium. You can see, if you were paying attention to the last slide, and this slide is succession, where that Alexandrium peaks earlier in the spring, and then you see Dinophysis. None of these levels are super high except for that one date there at the Ship Ashore Marina. This organism generally does not cause shellfish bed closures, but it's something to keep an eye on. I do think if I go back that this is probably the highest level we've ever seen in the harbor, so that's something to keep tabs on. Of all the harmful algal blooms, the one that's been most consistently a problem has been the rust tide, which in good news is one that's not harmful to humans, but in bad news is toxic to fish. So we call that ichthyotoxic. And it was pretty consistently present through both August and September, even into October in the waters, with some levels reaching certainly a density here that we would consider ichthyotoxic. That is, if there were fish caught in a bloom and that was the sustained level, they wouldn't last very long, particularly if they're very small. And this is generally one of the more difficult harmful algal blooms to sample correctly, in that it both migrates vertically and horizontally. So when you do get a hit like this, you can guess that the waters around were also likely rather high. But again, just really something that peaked up into September. And for perspective, actually, we had pretty severe blooms of Coccodinium both in August and September throughout the Peconic Estuary and Shinnecock Bay. So actually the patterns here are a little bit better maybe than some of the areas to the west, and not necessarily any worse than prior years in the Inner Harbor. I'm going to pivot now to the freshwater sites. Again, this is fairly straightforward. We just were having a look at 3 ponds in the watershed of Sag Harbor, and those are Long Pond, Little Long Pond, and then Lily Pond. And so here again, just for perspective, the arc of temperature through the summer, these ponds got pretty hot during the summer. These are really warm temperatures, in some cases over 30 degrees. This gives you a sense that not only are these small, but quite shallow, and therefore very sensitive to air temperatures. The levels of algae within the water column for these ponds in general were not terrible. The EPA standard for chlorophyll in freshwater bodies is a little bit more stringent than it is for marine water bodies. They want to see 8 micrograms per liter or lower. And you can see on average, all the sites were close to that, except for a large exceedance late in the season for Long Pond. And in addition to looking at total amounts of chlorophyll, we also were specifically looking at blue-green algae. In fact, I was remiss to not mention, that's the harmful algal bloom in freshwater. We call them blue-green algae because they make toxins. Well, we call them blue-green algae. It's a name for cyanobacteria. They're of concern because they can make toxins. And you can see in good news, both Lily Pond and Little Long Pond had almost non-detectable levels for most of the year. We did have a sample, however, late in the year in October in Long Pond that was actually almost more than exceeded the New York State DEC standard for blue-green algae blooms, and significantly so. The standard's 25, it reached 45. And so, one of the reasons actually I looked at this pond is because I had seen an image in the past of this pond looking awfully green. And I figured that image, maybe my eyes were deceiving me or it was something else, but clearly we weren't off, and that pond is prone to blue-green algae blooms. Those events can be ephemeral in some ecosystems on the South Fork, places like, for example, Wainscott Pond, Mill Pond, Lake Agawam. Those blooms will be present starting in May and don't end until the fall. But there are other systems like Long Pond, for example, where they may just crop up during the summer or even late in the fall. So this is definitely something to keep an eye on. Just as a reminder, I didn't give a lot of intro on this, so I should just give it now. These blue-green algae, they do make toxins. Those toxins are harmful to humans. Now, thankfully, no one's drinking this pond, but they're also harmful to pets. And so, for example, a dog died on Georgica Pond in 2012, consuming the water in Georgica Pond. That dog had an autopsy on it with the results sent to the New York State Health Department that declared that the cause of death was indeed blue-green algae. And there's been other reports in other water bodies on the South Fork, places like Fort Pond and Mecox Bay, where dogs have gotten sick from blue-green algae. So this is something definitely to keep an eye on, because it may be something, this is just 1 year of data. We just had one sample pop up. But, it may well be that in other years it looks different. And maybe this is the anomaly, but it could be the anomaly in a good or bad way. So just moving on away from these ponds and the marine systems, I just want to do a quick dive into improving water quality. We've covered this before, but I just want to emphasize it because I think it's worthwhile. We did see multiple water quality impairments that were associated with the overloading of nitrogen. So just as a review, we saw, again, actually 3 different types of harmful algal blooms in 2021, with all of them, not that any of them were consistently high, but given dates of concern for all 3 in the marine water bodies. So that's something to keep an eye on. In the past, it's not, certainly with regards to rust tide, it's not inconsistent with what we've seen in the past. So given that, and given other things that we've seen in the past, like low oxygen conditions or low water clarity, and the high levels of nutrients we've already seen, certainly getting nitrogen levels down is important. And so this is just review. You only hear from me once a year, so I'm just going to, as a reminder that all of these symptoms, due to prior studies, we were able to identify that it's on-site wastewater, so individual septic tanks and cesspools that are contributing high nitrogen that are leading to these impairments. So again, as a reminder, there are now systems that can be installed in place of existing systems, and there are grant programs in the towns of East Hampton and Southampton that can then be coupled with the grant programs through Suffolk County that combined can lead to almost $50,000 in grant money to install one of these systems. So that's a great option, and those funds are available now. So it's a good idea to try to do that while you can. I'll also mention that at the university, I also direct the New York State Center for Clean Water Technology, where we're harnessing science to engineer clean water for the protection of public health and the environment in New York and beyond. And there we've developed a novel septic system we call nitrogen removing biofilters that are really quite simple, composed of sand mixed with wood chips, and a single working part is a dosing pump over what we call a drain field. These systems have done very well in removing nitrogen. What you're looking at here is the amount of nitrogen, the effluent of coming out of these systems. Suffolk County will only approve a system that's less than 19 milligrams per liter. And so what this is showing, the systems that have provisional approval in the green, systems that have not been approved, and then what a regular system performs as. And you can see the systems we've developed, they're all iterations and variations of the nitrogen removing biofilters, are amongst the best out there. And we're meeting the standard. They're also removing all sorts of drugs and pharmaceuticals that we don't want getting into both our drinking water, but also our surface waters, with removal rates that exceed other, both certainly conventional systems, commercial systems, and sewage treatment plants. And of the 3 different systems we have, they're all listed here. I'm not going to spend time going into the details of them, but I'll just simply say that these will be approved by Suffolk County for general installation later in 2022. And our 3rd system we expect to be approved the following year. Okay. So the last overarching data set that I'm going to be presenting on is with regards to fecal bacteria, indicator bacteria, and our microbial source tracking approach. And again, when we look at this, we know that there can be many different sources of these types of bacteria. And so it's important to both look at the absolute amounts, which is usually we look at either fecal coliform bacteria for shellfish or Enterococcus for swimming. And I think it's worth mentioning, and I've mentioned this before, but I'd like to emphasize that my laboratory is certified by the New York State Department of Health. We've gained what's known as Environmental Laboratory Accreditation through the New York State Health Department for the measurement of fecal coliform bacteria. So simply stated, those analyses are, they're defensible in a court of law, and it's the highest standard there is. There's many groups out, I think, on the South Fork and on Long Island that measure fecal coliform bacteria. It's not that difficult, but to meet the stringency of the state health department's environmental laboratory accreditation program, you really need to have all of the quality assurance and quality control factors in place. So anyway, when I show you data on fecal coliform bacteria, we can all have good confidence that this is data that, again, would hold up in a court of law because of the rigor of that data. Okay, so we did these sorts of measurements both for the harbor sites and then for Havens Beach. I'm going to start with the harbor sites, and we'll start with fecal coliform bacteria. This is the bacteria by which the New York State DEC evaluates levels in order to determine if a water body should be open or closed for shellfishing. And you can see the outcomes here. Very low levels at the Ship Ashore Marina, somewhat higher levels in the inner region of where the yacht club is, and exceedances at Windmill Beach as well. And in good news, the Ship Ashore region, I believe, is seasonally open to shellfishing, and we really were in the right zone there. The troubling result here, of course, is this beacon site. Again, this site in particular collects runoff from the low-lying areas of Sag Harbor. That water is then pumped into a vault, and that vault is then exported out into the marine water body. So the earliest sampling date was from within the vault. Other dates were on the export of the water from the vault, on which there was dilution, certainly with the marine water. But you can see the levels were very, very high all across the board. Again, just for perspective, this is the shellfishing standard. And so you can see levels well above that on almost all the dates, and not a single date in which the sample collected was below the shellfishing standard. Now, we also looked at a more specific bacteria, Enterococcus, and we look at this because this is what the New York State Department of Health uses as the standard for permitting swimming or not. And you can see the patterns here are somewhat similar, but in some cases a few differences. So a couple of dates where these levels were higher at the Ship Ashore Marina compared to the fecal bacteria. The yacht club site looking a little bit better. Windmill Beach, I'll just call out and just say right off the bat, this is a concern if that's called a beach, and there are 3 dates in which the level did not meet the state health department criteria. I think that name maybe needs to be, it's not up to me. I'll just point that out. I'm not the decision maker. I'm the messenger showing that there were 3 dates in which the swimming standard was not met at Windmill Beach. And then also, again, note that at the beacon site, whether the sample came from within the vault or on the export, many dates where the levels were above the standard. So in this case, suggesting that this effluent is a source of contaminating bacteria. Just one other data set to look at, and that is we collected water from the sewage treatment plant. And on most dates, the levels were fine. We did have 2 dates that were high. Now this is only 2 out of, I believe, 11. And of course, this water does get diluted once it goes in. But there have been prior examinations of the sewage treatment plant. We did a similar thing last year and all the dates were fine. You can see there are 2 dates of concern here. And I believe even going back in the records, we had multiple years of records, and in almost all dates things look good, but on occasion I believe looking at the fecal coliform bacteria, there might be a date here or there with an exceedance. We had a couple here. I'll give you the reminder that last summer was an exceedingly wet summer with a lot of runoff, so I don't know the extent to which this may have been sewer overflow going into the plant or not. But looking overall, again, just reviewing here, certainly the beacon site was of concern for both locations. And again, there is concern about permissibility of swimming at Windmill Beach. But the next thing we want to do is look at the microbial source tracking. Where are these bacteria coming from? There was a point in time, actually even earlier this week, I wasn't sure we would even have this data. I should say I had better confidence this week, but there's been an incredible supply chain issue with the digital PCR chips for use for this, but we have the data in hand here to present. There's a lot of data to look at. It's all the different sites and all the different dates. So I'm just going to boil it down for this figure, which is an average of the dates for these particular sites. And there's a few things that stick out for me here. The first one is if you look at the beacon site, it's totally different from all the others. Right, and that maybe I should just review. What this plot shows is the percent contribution of fecal bacteria that would be coming from humans, from deer, from dogs and or small mammals, and birds. And so you can see there's at least a little bit of each, or some in most places. We can start the sewage treatment plant is the easiest one. It's almost all human signal. I think on one date there was a marker of dog and small mammal that, but you can see a very, very small amount. I think it amounts to about 10%, but as expected, all human there. You look at the marine sites and you get what we've seen in the past, a mix. You see a little bit of birds, potentially a human signal, also small mammals and dogs. And just a reminder with the human signal, sometimes that human signal with this particular assay, it doesn't tell you if those bacteria are alive or dead. So that's just telling you where the bacteria are coming from. But again, I do want to focus on this beacon site because the microbial source tracking just very clearly shows this site is not like the others, right? It's almost all birds. And so what this is telling you is that this water that's coming in is just, it's a different type of water. And again, it's purposely being pumped from upstream, low-lying areas. I don't know what those low-lying areas are. I'm not but I can say that they're, wherever they are, it seems that there may be, or there obviously is, the influence of birds there. So, prior slide showing high levels of overall total fecal bacteria at that site. and that unlike the other sites, this one's different and it seems to be coming primarily from burns. And the other sites look pretty much as we expect. This, I will just note, the Windmill Beach site is interesting. It's out of the inner harbor, unlike the yacht club, and right at the sort of the confluence of a bunch of roads. And so it may be experiencing, for example, direct road runoff. And that might be why the dog signal is higher there. But a pretty interesting outcome overall. Was not clear what the beacon site would yield with regards to results, but it's clearly not like the other sites. Okay, so just going to Havens Beach, I'm just going to do a quick rewind. And just as a reminder, I showed this last year, but I actually did a study of Havens Beach. I guess this is 15 years ago, where we looked at different levels of bacteria, specifically fecal coliform bacteria. And you can see back then we saw high levels above and below the standard, although this is looking at total coliform bacteria, which is not as specific. Last year, I presented this data on, this is again, Enterococcus being the type of fecal bacteria. And it was this data that sparked this year's study where we saw quite high levels of the Enterococcus fecal bacteria right in the sump. When we went further away, and this is, I think, offshore, and I can't remember how far offshore. I mean, I have to go back and check my notes, but let's just say for argument's sake, it was something like 300 feet offshore or 500 feet offshore. Levels were lower. So we knew last year that high levels coming out of the sump, not high levels when you went far offshore. But the question was, how about right on the beach? And it's great that people swimming offshore weren't going to be exposed, but what were the levels right on the beach? And of course, we'd be most concerned about, say, small children that may be playing just at the break, right as you just go into the water. And so you can see we had a pretty extensive sampling regime for this setup, sampling from the pipe that actually feeds the sump, sampling from within the sump, sampling as the water goes out of the sump into a pool below it. And then there's a pool on the beach I'll show momentarily that we also sampled. And then 3 sites right in the water where people might be exposed. So that would be right at the outlet of the sump, and again, onto the east and to the west. And again, this is an aerial photograph. This is showing the outlet from the sump. And then here is showing this pool that can accumulate on the beach from the outflow. And of course, this is an area where either a dog or a small child might seek to play, as well as within the coastal waters. So let's see what we found. We'll start with temperature here and some, it doesn't tell you too much, although interestingly that as per the ponds that I talked about before, that little beach pool heats up pretty good compared to the other sites. And that the pipe that's actually feeding the sump actually was cooler. And so that's interesting. It almost may be indicative of well, it might just simply be road runoff, but there also might be some groundwater seepage that's influencing that as well. And otherwise, things you can see follow fairly close together with the certainly the sump site being warmer than the beach sites. This is just salinity, which is a great tracer. So we know again that we had 3 sites that were on the beach. Let's see those, and the other ones are basically freshwater sites with maybe that sump pool just having a little bit of influence of salinity on one date. And then looking at oxygen, interestingly, the water that's going into the sump and also areas within the sump itself have quite low oxygen. So that tells you this is, and I think we all know this, but just a sign that this is not flowing water. This is fairly stagnant water, and that water even going anoxic. Within the sump itself, I had obtained a satellite image that suggested that there might be algae growing in the sump as well, which would be yet another concern, the export of potentially toxic blue-green algae. And well, thankfully, that's something we can cross off the list of a concern. There are algae growing in there. On one date, the levels were quite high, but in good news, it was not the variety, specifically the blue-green algae, that could be toxic. Now, because the salinity was so, where's this? The salinity is so low, that was a possibility, but thankfully we can cross that off the list. But what we can't cross off the list, unfortunately, are the bacteria, and specifically the fecal bacteria. I'm going to start here with fecal coliform. And so there's a lot of data here to look at, but let's go through it. I think maybe, I can't remember if the most recent report was updated with this, but this is going from north to south. So I tried to make it, well, somewhat north to south, at least through the feeding pipe through the outlet. And so what we're seeing is that certainly that feeding pipe on almost every date has very, very high levels of fecal coliform bacteria. We didn't have consistent sampling from within the ditch, but we did coming out of the sump, as well as in the pool that's there, on the beach, at the outlet site, and also to the east and west. And so what you can see is certainly that sump is being fed with water that has high levels of bacteria, and the water that's coming out is also high. And you can see here, certainly we can count up the dates. In fact, almost on all dates, right, at least near the shoreline, these are areas that are over the shellfishing standard. Now, this is really near shore, and I'll point this out again later, this is an area that is open to shellfishing. Looking at Enterococcus levels, again, we have very high levels that are showing up in the feeding pipe, and then also in the sump pool going out into the beach, and then also both to the east and the west. So multiple exceedances, multiple dates that are above the state health department standard for Enterococcus. That would be, so all of these ones here are the saline sites, and these are the ones on the beach. And it's, again, being fed seemingly from the sump. And we have lots of microbial source tracking data to go through, but instead of looking at each individual date, we'll just focus on the means, and that's what we see here. Because this data just came in, I did not have time to rearrange this graph. So it's not in the same order. But essentially what this result looks like, if you look at it, is that if you look at sites that are, the marine sites, again, are the east site, the west site, and I'm going to get it wrong now. Oh, these three are the ones that are receiving, are the beach sites. So essentially what it looks like is a strong bird signal that's essentially carrying through, and also some room for there being dog and small mammal bacteria that are making its way in there. Almost no human signal, which is a good thing. And as per what we usually find, only a low signal from the deer. But again, if you follow the sequence of it going from the sump to the beach, and then onto the pool and the beach, and onto the beach sites, it does look like a strong signal that's carrying across and through. And again, remember, different composition than what we saw from the other sites, right? So again, the fact that these are fairly consistent gives the sense that there is that connectivity. This does not look like the composition that we see, for example, the inner harbor regions, where it's mainly, in that case, recall small mammals and a human signal, right? And here it's dominated by birds. And it's interesting also that I haven't had enough time to think about this data. Recognize this also is reflective of the same signal that came out of Beacon, right? A strong bird signal. So it looks unlike the other ones. The commonality being that they're influenced by runoff from upland sources.
Right.
Okay. So just some quick thoughts about management on the fecal coliform bacteria front. Again, Havens Beach is open to shellfishing. So, I don't know many baymen in the Sag Harbor region. I'm sure there's no one harvesting clams right on the beach. But if they were, there might be issues. Certainly that is an area that's used for swimming. So mitigating that runoff for the purposes of making sure that swimming is not an issue, obviously, needs to be a priority, or should be a priority. Let me phrase it that way. Within marinas, we are finding some fecal bacteria. So to the extent possible, if there is any illicit discharge, obviously that would want to be minimized. The runoff from the beacon site is clearly a source of contaminating fecal bacteria. And so there may be ways to mitigate that before it is discharged. And, maybe I should rephrase this, but again, the Windmill Beach is open to swimming, and there were dates where it was over the levels permissible for swimming. So in conclusions, despite, of course, I always am focused on the what's wrong, but there are plenty of things that were right and have been right with Sag Harbor waters over the years. We hone in on the problems in order to solve them, but don't forget that on average, many of the conditions are good. There have been and there were impairments, of course. We know that they now have the strongest data yet that the sump is contaminating the beach at Havens Beach. So mitigating that is likely should be a priority. And somehow also mitigating or treating the runoff from the beacon site probably makes sense. It's possible that some of the contamination from that particular site is reaching, say, for example, Windmill Beach. And then, as discussed before, upgrading septic systems and or hooking up homes to the sewage treatment plant is always a good idea. And certainly as we make changes, we'll want continued monitoring in order to ensure that those changes are coming to the outcomes that we're looking for. So with that, I'll thank everybody who supported this particular study, participated in this particular study, and certainly thank Marianne Eddy for her tireless efforts in organizing and supporting this complex, multifaceted study. So with that, I will close, and I would be very happy to turn this over to a discussion or answer any questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
What would you suggest is the best way to mitigate the sump at Havens Beach? We have that filter in, but what other things would you suggest?
Well, I mean, in a perfect world, I think there would be some sort of alternative hydraulic routing. So for example, a wetlands that could be put in that maybe could process that water further. Right now the whole system operates on gravity. And so, it would seem that, therefore the beach is at the will of the rainfall, frankly. So some way of not having gravity be the driving force for that water would also be a good idea, I think.
So originally there was a meandering path or a meandering stream that went through Havens and I believe cut across the parking lot area. Is that something, that meandering stream? Is that what you're referring to?
Maybe something like that, or again, just, a wetland situation or other sort of native plantings where instead of and there could also be opportunities for that water to go to ground. I know the water table is very shallow there.
Right.
And so, but there could be opportunities for that water to be instead. Again, I think the current scenario that I think should be avoided is that you don't want the discharge being at the whim of Mother Nature, right? Because then that just means that you're gonna have slugs of water going out onto the beach. So somehow,
if I could just jump in there with this, is Trustee Corish. We did apply to New York State for grant to study Havens Beach last year. We were denied. We understand where we fell short, and everything that Dr. Gobler has been mentioning is something that we were considering. So we hope to be successful this year. We're going to reapply, and I'll keep you posted on that progress. But the idea of a meandering stream and also studying the entire watershed so that we could divert water upstream before it ever gets to Havens Beach is something that we wanted to look at in that study. So maybe Dr. Gobler could give us a little help and direction as we resubmit that to New York State for grant funding.
Certainly, and I think I'll just mention, of course, that well, every grant system is different, but I think the data that's been generated here should at least it should help push that proposal to the top of the pile. Certainly, the need is quite obvious now.
I agree. This data is fantastic, and the detailed study that we did this year, and Marianne oversaw this year, and that you provided, I think, will be enormously helpful in gaining the funds we need to move this forward.
So I'd just like to add that, because it may not be obvious to people, when we're talking about the feeding pipe at Havens Beach, my understanding is we gathered samples right from Bay Street. It was like there's a storm drain that goes from Bay Street right into the head of the sump on the south end of that whole long waterway. And so it just clearly runoff. I mean, there have been different, suppositions as to where all the fecal coliform and enterococcus are coming from. But I think this really nails it, that it's the runoff from the whole watershed that's coming down into Havens. Chris, if you have a moment, I listened to your State of the Bays last night, and it was terrific. I think that one of the things that is going to motivate people to do more IA systems and to look at the nitrogen problem more clearly is when they understand that their own health is at risk. I mean, it's nice when you talk about, harmful algae blooms and, maybe a dog died here or there. But I think what you did last night, and I don't know if you can summarize it without like recreating that presentation, but the incidence of cancer and the incidence of other, deleterious health effects from high nitrogen in drinking water.
Yeah, and so I won't show slides, but I'll just simply say, just making it plain. Currently, the standard for nitrate in drinking water is 10 milligrams per liter. That's to prevent something known as blue baby syndrome. And that's, again, something very specific for infants that people don't, and so that's the standard that the drinking water code is built around. But in the past decade or so, there's been mounting epidemiological evidence, both at the National Institutes of Health, but also at health institutes across Europe and elsewhere, doing epidemiological studies and finding links between elevated levels of nitrate in drinking water and higher incidences of multiple types of cancer: gastric cancer, bladder cancer, kidney cancer, ovarian cancer. And that's very simply because nitrate in the stomach converts to something called nitrosamine, which is a carcinogenic compound. The same reason we don't want to eat a lot of bacon, right? Bacon's preserved with nitrite and nitrates. And so, there's not going to be an immediate sea change, but this is how health policies change. There's research, epidemiological studies, and then ultimately people discover, oh, gee, well, maybe we want the nitrate standard to be not just protecting babies against not getting enough oxygen in their bloodstream, but maybe we should be looking at the potential links to cancer. Now, there's more studies to be done. Stony Brook University Medical School has actually applied to the National Institutes of Health to do a cohort study here on Long Island to follow this up. But, bottom line is we want nitrogen levels as low as possible in our drinking water supplies. And that's what IA systems are meant to help to do.
Doris, does anybody else have their hand up? I don't want to hog the floor, but I
see Shannon Richards.
I see Shannon Richards is raising his hand. Shannon?
Good evening, folks. Dr. Gobler, first I wanted to say thank you very much for your research, for your lab, for your graduate students. 30 some odd years ago, before all this was white, I was an NIH undergraduate fellow under the MARC and MBRS programs. I attended your presentation last night. I loved hearing your grad students in the room. It reminded me of wonderful poster sessions and the incredible work that they do to contribute to your overall research. So to the entire team, please thank them.
Thank you.
Two questions, and one is a burdensome question. But I used to get tagged with this stuff as an undergraduate in the lab, and I'm wondering if you might entertain it. You've clearly been doing research in our waterways for going back to 2008. I think it's extraordinary. I have been continuing to work with the village. I've even reached out directly to Stony Brook and to your lab to kind of capture all of those subsequent reports at different years, at different times that have been generated. But one of the things I wonder if your lab would consider for the village at some future time when things aren't as burdensome is whether or not it could be possible to collapse the data as a bar graph, sort of a trending line to say, especially as I've noticed that the evolution of your presentations, more and more sites are added as the years have gone by, which I think is wonderful. But there have been consistent sites that have remained, whether it be Havens, whether it be the Bag Harbor, throughout the last 4, 5, 6 years. And it would be very interesting both for myself and for my community. I'm a 5th generation member of the Azure Rest community there in the village of Sag Harbor. And to the village at large, to be able to maybe in singular tables versus individual reports, be able to see 2000, let's say 2018, 19, 20, 21 next to each other for common sites on these common contaminants and see what those trend lines are doing. So again, it's a burdensome ask. It's somebody spending a lot of time in Excel and creating tables. I know what that looks like, but I'm hoping your lab might consider it. And then one last question is, I do know that what we do at one end of the bay is beginning, in my personal observational experience, begin to show evidence of having impact at the other end of the bay, specifically at the east end and at Little Northwest Creek. I believe one of your past reports may have started showing some reporting data coming out of that. I know the village was very kind to work with the community and some state funding to re-dredge that back marsh, saltwater marsh, I would think that would be classified. And I know that last year, I didn't see any crabs. I didn't see any fish. The scallops are all gone. The mussels were really absent. And those grass mounds that the mussels seemingly used to work as a brickwork bulkhead to keep them together, with the mussels gone, they seem to be breaking down and the particulates are clogging that creek. So I would also hope if there's anything that the sands communities, the village as a whole, could do to help your lab begin to also think about whether or not and how we're affecting Little Northwest Creek. Because as I understand it, Little Northwest Creek in part are almost like the lungs of the bay in terms of a filtration standpoint. And I wonder what we're doing to it. Last year in the spring, it was very, very brown for a very long time, longer than I'd ever seen it brown before. And it would be curious to see what we're doing at that end of the beach as well. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, well, thank you for your interest. And as it turns out, we're in the process of trying to generate a massive long-term data set for all the monitoring that we do. So that's a work in progress, and it's not even specifically for the village, it's for all the work that we do. And so when we get to the finish line there, your request and your ask will be actually straightforward, because we'll just be able to dial that up and send that off. So you're right, it is a big lift. And the biggest part is actually just getting it all organized. But and once it is, it shouldn't be as bad. So and I know that, yes, last year we did do some sampling at Little Northwest Creek. I think that was purposely meant, and Marianne designed that sampling to be the before part of before the dredging. And so, it may well be and sometime in the future, we're back there to make the to compare to how things are now.
Thank you again.
Could I just pipe in? This is Will Sharp. I've been working with the Blue Water Task Force to test the water in the creek, and before the dredging and subsequent. And the last 2 tests were on March 7th and this Monday. And on March 7th, the count was something like 98. We're talking Enterococcus. And then On the 4th, it was 213, lots of bacteria. Sunday, there was some pretty intense brown tide. I would call it brown tide, red tide, I'm not sure. It's pretty dark. And that was not the case when we did the test on Monday morning. There was no rain. It was pretty calm. You know, the question is, and what Mary Ann and several other people have talked about, was to test the creek before the dredging, and then to see if the dredge flushes the creek. We don't know yet. There's still some sandbar issues. Frankly, they didn't dredge it enough. If you look at it, there's still some sandbars inboard of the creek. They did do the exact thing that the real estate people wanted, which is to increase the beach, but they didn't really dredge. And I think everybody that's involved in the dredging realizes we have a maintenance follow-up, so we can go back over the next few years and dredge more. You know, there's a debate. I don't know, and maybe Dr. Gobler knows this. I don't think this is bacteria from septic. I think there's a lot of waterfowl there, and that might just be God's little pond that is meant for the waterfowl. There are crabs, there are blue crabs, etc. Not like there used to be, but the good news is that we are piggybacking Dr. Gobler's work. Not as the numbers are not as crispy, but I think it's science, and Dr. Gobler could reflect on that. But he's inspired us to be citizen scientists and try to get more testing. And I should send this report over to Azarest. I don't know if Steve Williams has it or not. I've blasted in our community, but going back to Dr. Gobler, this is really all of this information, and the east end of town has never been really analyzed like the west end, and now it's slowly getting that way, so we get a sense of where we can go swimming, for instance.
I just want to add a couple of things. One, when you were talking about the NRBs, Chris,
Yes.
that we should brag, because in Sag Harbor, we have one or two over at Mashash and Hewitt Park, correct?
That's right. I forgot to mention that. We installed 2 at Mash Park last fall. That's right.
And how are they doing?
They're doing very well, in fact. And I know they're performing very well. And I guess the woman who's in charge of the park there was just thrilled with the way the install went. So if you ever need, when we need a good reference for someone to recommend them, she's on the list because she was so happy with the way it went. I mean, you know, when they get installed, we fully restore the site as well. So.
Right. Yeah, I think Will and Lily and I and Hillary Thayer, we went over there and we watched them putting in the, you know, the drain field. And it was great to see it in 3 dimensions.
Yeah.
You know, not just on a diagram. I have one last question. And when you were talking about the algae in the ponds, and the last date when the Long Pond went sky high, I didn't see that there was any data collection from the other 2 ponds on that date. It wasn't.
Yeah, I saw that. I think one thing I need to go back and look into the records there. I think it's even possible that I think there's 2. It's possible that it was just that sample collected and nothing other. I think it's also possible that we went back there based on someone saying, oh, it's starting to look, have you seen Long Pond? It's starting to look a little green. And in fact, going back and actually affirming that indeed it was blue-green algae.
And we're going to be looking to see whether or not the microcystin was part of that bloom or not.
I hope so. I need to confirm that we have that sample, but if we do, we certainly can analyze it. And I'm nearly certain that we do have that sample. It just hasn't been analyzed yet.
Marianne, we have a number of people who've had their hands up for some time. I know John Aldred he's a trustee. Tommy John Schiavone has his hand up, and Steve Williams. So if they could be called on.
So maybe Tommy John, maybe we'll start with you.
Thank you, Dr. Gobler, and I certainly appreciate your work here. And we look forward to continuing these studies. And Marianne, You've done yeoman's work collecting the monies to make this happen and to keep this going on over time. I'm very happy to hear that we could be using some of these data to parlay that into grants from the state, in addition to the water quality monies from East Hampton and Southampton Town. So well done there. And Dr. Gobler, I missed your presentation last night, but I am looking forward to looking at it on Channel 22. I heard it was very good. I had a question about the biofilters in Mashashamua Park. That was one of our projects that we funded over there. And I was gonna ask, are you tracking it? Is it, how do you track it? Is it possible to get that data for the town of Southampton, because they seem like very good systems? And is the one for the West Hampton School District scheduled to go in soon?
Sure. So I can say we sample the systems once a month. And so we've got data through, I think we probably started in January. So I can certainly compile that and pass that data on for the ones in Mash Park. And for West Hampton Beach, there were, in good news, the engineers, H2M is wrapping up their study. And so they have, they're moving forward, I think, on I think they're going to have a few different potential designs to be considered. And and they'll probably won't be, there'll be combinations of commercial systems coupled with our systems. So, because that seems to be, just based on space and cost, the best fit there in particular. But we do look forward to being able to share those plans and, for the consideration of how to best move forward there.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for the time. I just wanted to ask Dr. Gobler that question about West Hampton.
Okay, well, thank you. John Aldridge. Aldridge.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Chris, I just had a question. Back to the Havens Beach sump. What do you think that a simple aeration system might, a simple aeration system might help in that sump?
I don't think an aeration system would help, because it's just receiving, the issue that it's getting the bacteria, it's getting the bacteria coming from the feeding pipe. And so I don't think aeration would do too much. Because it's not being generated in situ. There might be opportunities for treatment within that sump. But that might, that would be sort of advanced. There's a new technology that I've been looking at in a research platform. It's called actually Nano Bubbles, and it's a whole lecture that I won't give right now. But so regular aeration, simple aeration wouldn't do the trick. Nano bubble approach with particular types of gas might be effective, but that's early days and very experimental. So I think in advance of that, I think the water needs to be, step one is making sure that not having a system that's like I said, that's a gravity feed at the whim of Mother Nature.
Dr. Gobler, just to follow up on that, I mean, we have a filtration system there. They're antibacterial sponges, I believe, by the Abtec Corporation. They were originally installed in, I believe it was 2014 or 2015. They were recently replaced at considerable cost with newer sponges. It looks to me, and I'll ask you whether this is correct, it looks to me that like they may not be doing the job, because you're getting bacterial levels before and after the sponges, which are similar.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know enough. I'm familiar with the idea of sponges for runoff. It's not surprising to me that they're not 100% effective. I think it's hard to say. I think Marianne would have to remind me. It's even possible we have Marianne, is it correct to say that we have before and after the sponge replacement samples? Like if it was done in the middle of our study, was that the case?
Yeah, we got some, I believe it was in June, and then we got some after they were replaced. I think that was this year.
Yeah.
At that. But
yeah, so I mean, the bottom line is that I can't, I would need a controlled experiment in order to tell you how effective or non-effective those sponges are. But the fact that, we saw high levels breaking throughout the year says that they're not 100% effective.
Right. I think that we just need another solution. If they're there and they're, mitigating the bacteria to some extent, that's great, but it's certainly not solving our problem. And I think this documents that we have a problem, sponges or no sponges.
Yeah, I'll also say one of the things we discovered last year is there appeared to be river otters living in the ditch, or at least were. So obviously that's going to contribute to the small animals.
As well. That's right. And there may well be birds, there's birds that are residing in there.
They're ducks and yes.
Yeah. So
My
again,
apologies for interrupting, but we also had like glowing blue-green water in that transference last year documented. And I don't think we're testing that freshwater mix for blue-green algae, but it might be something to consider. I know the village has overhead shots where it looks like it's glowing.
Yeah, we actually did look for the blue-green algae last year. And so I think it's, at least last year, we didn't see high levels. I had seen similar images, Mr. Richards, and can say that there were on dates high levels of algae, but they weren't the toxic blue-green type. I see Mr. Williams has been waiting for a while to ask a question. So let's hear from him.
Thank you, Dr. Gobler. This is for Shannon and I are neighbors in the same owners association. It's 75 years old, and many of the older houses with the oldest septic tanks were built waterfront on the beach, and we are east of the, I guess it's called the shore property, between the shore, and then the other two associations go as far as Little Northwest Creek. We're celebrating our 75th anniversary this year, so some of these septic tanks are really outdated. And we had a conversation at our owners meeting on Sunday past that was talking to people about the grant system in East Hampton, and we're trying to encourage them. I was concerned when I learned that really only Fiji Clean and Hydro Action are really operating consistently based on the last 2 years below the performance of the many other systems that you listed or pictured earlier in your report. So we are concerned that if we're going to go through the effort to do this, we want to be as effective as possible, because the water
absolutely
near and dear to us. We're planning to do a briefing meeting, and I'm concerned that there seems to be no linkage between the grants from East Hampton and the contractor's selection of the system. So therefore, our interest is only recommending contractors that use the Fuji or the Hydro Action. And unfortunately, it seems that the contractors have a project management team with certain consultants, architects, engineers, and designers. And before we take our 100+ members and collectively underperform what's possible, is there any indication of where we can get a list of what contractors are using what systems, et cetera?
Yeah, if you go to so Suffolk County, everything has to flow in the end through Suffolk County Department of Health. And there's a specific site, it's called, I believe it's called reclaimourwaters.info, if I'm not mistaken. And that site that's the site that Suffolk County Department of Health Services runs specifically for these upgrades. And it has information, up-to-date information on all of the different systems and their performance, and also people who can be involved in both the designing the systems, installing the systems. So again, I just pulled it up, so now I can be 100% certain. It's reclaimourwater.info.
Thank you.
And so that should give you, a good sense of, what's out there, what's available, performance, and who the different installers are and what the options are. You did correctly state that, right now, Fuji Clean and Hydroaction are the two top performing systems. On the Fuji Clean front, there's been, I don't know how many thousands of those installed globally. And so, that seems to be a system that, it has generally performed well. I can say that. But again, I would encourage you to check out that site because it has more information. And it's meant to sort of be agnostic with regards to technology.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
One quick question, Dr. Gobler, and thank you for your time. In that drainage ditch that runs down to Havens from Bay Street, do the Phragmites act as a filter?
Well, to some extent, they're probably, if there's Phragmites along there, as I know there are, they're probably taking up for example, some of the nitrogen and phosphorus, so some of the nutrients out of there. They're probably doing not too much when it comes to the bacteria, however.
Because it's pretty thick with Phragmites, and I know they cut them back last year.
Yeah.
Thank you for your response.
Sure.
I would just like to say, I think that the science about which of the IA systems work or do not work so well is really important. On the Harbor Committee, most of the units that we see are Fuji Clean, correct me if I'm wrong. But I think with Mr. Williams and any group that's wanting to go through this, there are particular engineers that have done a lot of the Fuji Clean, et cetera, and they're based out here. They're very familiar with this. But I think any of us that are approving these should look at the efficacy because they're not all Ford 150 pickups. They're different, and it would be ridiculous to put one in that's half the efficiency as a Fuji Clean. So that's important information. I just read it last week. I know it's out there.
Dr. Gobler, I watched your presentation last night, and actually Marianne took one of the questions I was going to ask you tonight. But just to go back to it about the levels of nitrogen or nitrates in the drinking water, and you emphasized last night how the levels are, even though they may be below the 10 milligram per liter, a level that's supposedly safe. Even levels as low as 2 milligrams per liter might be cancer causing. And I couldn't see whether you had data on Sag Harbor specifically as to what the level is in either our county supplied drinking water or the local wells that some of us still have.
Yeah, the data that I showed last night was specifically on tap water sampled and analyzed with Suffolk County Department of Health Services. So I could certainly, I'd have to go back and look. I could certainly figure out from that. I don't have it off the tip of my tongue here or pulled up, but I could figure out what that average level is for the Sag Harbor zip code.
And the two sort of follow-up questions on that was one of the things that you emphasized last night was the degree to which it's wastewater that's contributing the nitrogen in both the drinking water, both the groundwater and the surface water. And I believe the figure that you said was 70 to 90% is a contribution from wastewater, not from fertilizer, et cetera, as point was thought to be the major contributor.
Correct. That's what we found specifically for Sag Harbor and Sag Harbor Cove as well.
The other question, I know that you're working on systems with the NRB that are performing better than the typical IA system. But the concern I have is to an extent is that people seem to assume that the current IA systems are a solution or a long-term solution. But looking at the levels of nitrogen that come out of those systems, even though they may be 1/3 or 1/4 of the levels that come from the old-fashioned septic systems, they are still discharging wastewater with a level of nitrogen that is 2 or 3 or 4 times higher than what would be considered safe. So especially if there's new construction with an IA system, it's certainly contributing to the problem, not helping it. In other words, don't we have to get to a lower level before the IA systems can be considered a long-term solution?
Well, I mean, the standard now is 19 milligrams per liter. And, recognize that when wastewater is discharged from a system, it mixes with and is diluted by, say, rainwater that falls through and percolates through the aquifer as well. So even though it might be 19 milligrams per liter, when that volume of wastewater mixes with the volume of rainwater that's falling through the aquifer and mixing in the aquifer as well, that's going to result ultimately in levels of nitrogen that are going to be, much, much lower. So probably below 2 milligrams per liter. And this is all, when Suffolk County performed their sub-watershed study, they took these sorts of things into account to come up with priority areas for upgrades and how many homes to upgrade. And the 19 milligrams per liter, I was kind of privy to some of the discussions as the standard was set. And at the time it was, if getting too far below that would have excluded many, if not all, there was a concern there'd be no technologies that could actually achieve it. So, maybe in the future that, as they get more data, they could become more stringent on that standard and drop it, say, to 15 because there's enough systems that are performing at that level. But again, while it's high right at the end of pipe, when you mix in all the rainwater, that drops down quite low by the time it gets to, say, a wellhead. Let's see. I see Susan.
Susan.
Trustee. East Hampton Town Trustee. You have to unmute. Sorry.
I'm asking Susan to unmute. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Hi, Marianne and John. John and I were just in a meeting yesterday. I was in attendance last night, but via Zoom, and I really enjoyed your presentation. Every time I watch you, I learned something new. So it's always important. I really like to stay on top of things and have things repeated, but also you included last night a statement from Martin Luther King that really was very provocative and emotional and terrific. And I'd like to hear that Monday night.
Okay, I'll see
two
if
things.
I can't.
I'm here to say, I have a question. I think actually to John Parker, your statement about the IA systems, we have heard that some of them are not as efficient as others. But last night, Chris, you had pointed out that there's the wood box that you also featured this evening, that in addition to the IA system, this seems to be an add-on that helps the IA system to be more efficient. Can you again describe that to us, since that is the question that John Parker brought up about the current IA system?
Sure, that's it. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Also, I noticed that there are IA systems that are still not approved, but I think as time goes by, like anything else, it's like a car, as time goes by, they improve on products. So it might behoove some of us, I live in the Northwest Woods, so I'm not one of those immediate people whose septic system is running out into the water. But I think sometimes if we hold back a little bit and like the wood box that you showed last night, maybe adding that on would be more helpful, but also waiting a little bit to see the newer products that might be more advanced. And then my last thing is I would like to invite everyone here to see Dr. Gobler again at the East Hampton Town Trustees meeting, which is coming up on Monday evening at 6:30. And you will be the first guest speaker and you'll have the floor. So we're reserving our program for you on Monday night, 6:30, and look forward to that. So to my question about the IA systems.
Yeah, so thank you for that prompt, because I had I should have thought of that, but yeah, so we do have the wood chip boxes that can be attached to existing IA systems like a FujiClean or a HydroAction. Those wood chip boxes are meant to, they carry out denitrification. So any remaining nitrate that comes out of those systems can be denitrified away. And so we have systems, for example, that are maybe underperforming, but they can knock down in some cases, the nitrate as low as 2 milligrams per liter. And we're even working on a new, what we're calling a denitrifying drain field that could be sort of like, you could think of it as a mini NRB that could also be co-opted onto existing IA systems. And if you check out that county website, the reclaimourwater.info, they are offering what they call, I guess it's an incentive program for these sort of polishing steps. So, and so with that extra money, potentially these could be added for almost no cost.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I should, yeah, very good.
Have we covered all the hands?
Yeah. Oh, let me take mine down.
All right.
We did, Marianne.
All right, great. Chris, thank you so much. Great presentation, good work. And I think, because you mentioned, some things, supplies were late in coming. There's probably some polishing to the research that we've done this past summer.
Yes, I have to add in, I'm going to add in those new figures from the microbial source tracking.
Yeah.
And I'll see if I'll get a thumbs up or thumbs down on that microsystem sample.
Okay, terrific. Thank you so much. And
Okay.
See you Monday night.
Thank you kindly for your attention, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christopher.
Have a wonderful weekend, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gobler.
Marianne?
Yeah, I'm trying to switch over, so.
Okay.
Hey, guys.
And Marianne, by the way, it looks like you're looking at us through a fog. Do you have a big smudge over your camera or something?
Yeah, it's actually a little bit more involved in that. And that's why I'm going back and forth. I went to the laptop with the smudgy camera because I wanted to be able to see the presentation, with good resolution rather than on my phone. But I'm trying to get back to my phone for the rest of the meeting because it seems inappropriate to have that fuzzy picture. So here we go. Let's see if I can get there.
I'll be back in just a moment.
Okay. Let's go ahead. My phone is being really bullshit, and for some reason, I may have to turn it off and turn it back on. But if you can bear with the fuzzy picture, I think we can pick up the rest of the agenda here. I imagine John will be back in a moment. We did the passenger ferry. We have the lead agency determination. Would you all agree that we should move that to the end of the meeting, seeing that that probably doesn't really involve anybody but Harbor Committee members, and go and pick up the two pieces of old business? Do I hear yes?
Yes.
Okay. So I think the next thing on the agenda then is 36 John Street.
Correct.
Is there somebody to speak to the applicant?
I see Kate McHenry. Kate?
Hi, good evening. Sorry, I had to turn everything on. How's everybody doing this evening?
Great, thank you.
Everybody can hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So First of all, I would like to have my previous testimony from August 5th entered into the record. I don't know if that's something that I need to formally do. But in any case, we've come tonight with some revisions and some findings for the board. It has been a while and I do apologize. We had some issues with the surveyor that we were using originally. And after months of delay, we had to go with another company. I have submitted the revised survey for your consideration along with several foiled village documents. First off, and I think most important is to clarify the issue with the slate. I do have some new information, and after doing a foil and researching the extensive file that came back from the village, I found that the village approval allows the slate, but it was to be set in compacted gravel. My client has informed me that the slate is still set in gravel, but he cemented in between the cracks to avoid weeds popping up. He understands now that this does make the slate impervious when he does that, and he is willing to remove all cement and bring the slate back into compliance. In regards to the updated survey, I think the breakdown of the new survey is certainly much clearer. On the left-hand side, you will see he has reflected the current and proposed lot coverage, including the slate. He has also shown calculations from the high water mark, the wetland line, as well as the top of the bluff. On the top right corner, he gives distances to all three as well. After removing the pool, we will take our distance from the wetland line from 46 feet to 52 feet. Our lot coverage will go from 3,031 square feet to 3,018 square feet. That is including the slate. If we bring the slate back into compliance by removing the cement and making it pervious again, we will bring the lot coverage to 1,680. In regards to the revegetation plan, we have consulted with Dragonfly Landscaping in Spionk, and they indicated that due to the time of year, it is impossible to identify the current plantings until everything begins to bloom and pop up. They would need to be able to identify the current plantings in order to provide us with the revegetation plan. I did see in the FOIL documents a revegetation plan from February 3rd, 2012 that was previously submitted to the village. We would be willing to go off of that plan if the committee so wishes. Again, we believe the relief we are seeking is minor and would have no negative environmental impact or negatively impact the surrounding neighborhood. I welcome any questions the committee may have at this time. I don't know if I lost. I think I lost her.
I think we lost Mary Ann.
She started to say something and then I think I lost her.
Chick, do you have any comments?
Connecting. She's Mary Ann?
Well, while she's doing that, can Chick give us an overview?
So this is the one that we've been updating the committee on a monthly basis because, as Kate mentioned, she's had difficulty addressing some of the prior Harbor Committee comments and getting the survey work done. We received, or at least I received, information late this morning. I've been in meetings all day. I have not had a chance to review any of the submitted materials. Doris can verify our deadlines, but we typically look for materials to be submitted, sufficiently before the meeting so that we can review. So I have no comments on the submitted materials at this time that came in late morning because I just haven't had a chance to review them. That review may result in comments. I think it would be helpful for Kate to display the plan if you have the technology to do so. If not, I may be able to work off your email and bring the plan up because I think it would be good to understand, kind of where we left off in, I guess, August of 2021 and pick up the ball and have, Kate present the application to this committee's satisfaction so that we can understand it. But as far as the recent submission, I have not reviewed it.
I apologize I did provide Doris with the survey last Friday because I know that's the deadline. I apologize for providing that other information to you late. I do have the survey on my computer. I have just never I'm gonna be honest, this Zoom thing is a little bit new. I've never projected something like that. So I don't exactly know how to do that. And I would hate to have the board stumble through me figuring it out.
That's okay.
Let me see what I can do then, if you'll just give me a moment.
Okay,
So,
I do appreciate it.
so with this, is the survey the document that would help you to present this, Kate?
Well, there's a few things. I emailed the survey to Doris on Friday alone, and then today I sent an email to both you and Doris, and it was a revegetation plan from 2011, and I believe a harbor committee approval and like a very rough old survey, but that appears to be the new right there.
This is the new survey.
Yes, I believe so.
So would you like to, again, it's been many, many months.
It has.
To indicate what is proposed on this project site and kind of get us back up to speed?
Absolutely. We're proposing to remove the pool and the patio surrounding it, and we're proposing to put in the screen porch. We will be giving back 8 feet landward that the permitted pool is right now. And again, like I said, as far as any sort of plantings, there have been several approvals done by Sag Harbor Village, and we would be willing to work off of one of those old approved plans if the committee so chooses. But otherwise, I do hope that it's pretty self-explanatory. Any questions that anybody has, I'll do the best that I can to answer.
Well, the wetlands law has changed over the years. I'm not sure how old those old planting plans are, but they might need to be totally revised.
That is these are from 2000, and I'm sorry, I misspoke before. It's based on a survey from 2011, but this planting is plan is from 2012.
Is the planting plan up on the screen now?
Correct, it is. From what I'm looking at, it is.
Okay.
Can you enlarge it a little bit, please?
I'm trying my best, Lily.
Oh, thanks, Chick. Well done.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm sorry. Thank you.
I don't know why I can't get rid of this other screen here, but let me just try something again. And how the sausage is made here.
You're doing better than me.
A little bit better. So it looks like it's a 25-foot buffer from, I'm not sure where. There, we do want to make sure that this is consistent with the
that
wetland
says wetland line.
But it actually looks like it's landward of the wetland line. And again, we're kind of doing this on the fly here.
Correct. I agree.
And I think we all would have wanted the opportunity to review this. But I see a wetland line here. It's from 2011. There may be a new wetland line on the survey. Looks like that was delineated in March of 2021. That line would be acceptable. So we should have that line or this plan transferred. And we look for a 50-foot buffer from the wetlands, and that's in the code. There's also a setback from the bluff, and it looks to me as though the survey is showing a bluff on this property as well, top of bluff here.
Yes.
So we do recognize, and I'll let the committee speak certainly, but, we recognize that your changes are pretty modest, and you're working with the slate patio to make that pervious. You're removing a pool and putting in a patio, so that's almost like a trade-off. I think we'd want to try and maximize setbacks wherever possible, but you're not really doing much to the house, which is good. So I think it helps for us to understand and for the committee to understand what's being proposed. But from my standpoint, I would want this revegetation plan to be updated I'd want to check the genus and species on the Virginia rose, just to make sure that's native. And we'd like to expand that buffer wherever possible. And other than that, I'll reserve comments until we can review this in more detail.
So there's a variation on the buffer. So it doesn't have to be straight across. It can come up the sides of the property. The square footage is what we will be looking for. So that whatever the 50-foot buffer would be, if it were a straight sort of buzz cut across the end of the property, that whatever that number is, you could put it in an irregularly shaped buffer.
Okay. So the square footage, so we would take the width of the lot, and forgive me, I have been expediting for quite, but linear buffers is something that's a little bit new to me. So we would take the square footage of the 50-foot wide lot times 50-foot wide, and that square footage is what we're looking for. So however we depict that on the lot, you're okay with, as long as we get that number.
It should be continuous, but yes, however you get it. However you serpentine way you want to do it, but yeah.
You can't have it broken up in shrubs here, and so it
No.
has to be, if it's going to be here, it has to look like, I got it. That was a little bit what one of the things I was confused about last time.
Yeah, Kate, that's specified in the code.
Okay.
I'm just going to that now to get you the section, but it's very clear in chapter 285. And there is this buffer average concept, which is a good concept, a great concept. It gives a little flexibility, especially on lots that are developed.
Like this.
I would urge you to look at that section and, well, certainly conform if possible. And if not, then we kind of go to alternatives to, demonstrate conformance with chapter 285-9D. So I would definitely point you in that direction to take a look. And as I said, maximizing setbacks, you're removing a pool, but putting in a slate patio, we should be looking at, are you decreasing setbacks, increasing setbacks? I don't really see that information in what's been presented. Sometimes a table, a matrix to kind of compare existing and proposed. And, we're just trying to help you along here.
No, I appreciate anything that I can take back to the surveyor.
It's very small on my screen because I've got a small screen, but you had a planting plan, and I wasn't able to see what the width of the buffer was in that planting plan.
That one appeared to be 25.
It was 25 feet, John.
25 feet, thank you.
There's a dimension right here. It is small, but this should be more.
Okay, I can see it now. Yeah, I can see it. Probably have my better glasses on, but
no, it was.
I have medium ones and strong ones, and
All right, so I think that we're going to see you next month, and you're going to take this input back and get everything to us in good fashion so we can study this and be prepared, all of us.
And I would urge if the update the restoration plan, seek to meet the buffers and check the code. And you're welcome to call me if you have any questions.
I think she's on mute.
I don't know how I ended up muted. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Were you hearing us?
I was hearing you. So right now I have that we're going to do a table with the existing and proposed setbacks so we can see that illustrated a little bit better. We're going to try to get that 50-foot buffer continuous, but it can be linear. I'm going to check to see if Virginia rose is native, and I'm going to check out 285-9D and anything else that needs to be, tweaked or fit to comply with that to the best of my ability. That's what I'm going to work on before the next
And
time.
to also transfer the landscape restoration plan to a current survey or a separate plan so that it's consistent with what you're proposing for the site.
Now, just quickly, because I know that the concern with the landscaper was the time of year or whatever. If we transpose that, can we just transpose it as it is, or do we have to show that plan was approved? So theoretically, everything that is shown on that plan should be there, but I don't know if it is. Do we have to show existing or proposed?
I wouldn't take anything that was approved in 2011 and assume it's going to be approved now.
Well, we have to have some sort of a base to work off of, you know, so I'd rather get something visually for you guys. And even if next time you come and you say, we want different, we want more, we want in a different place, like, but right now I have to get that vegetation shown.
Well, there's a native plant guide that Doris can give you, or maybe gave you when you took got an application.
Yes,
and
I do
those
have
are the
one.
kinds of plants that we're looking for. So that would be something that you could do before you come before us again, and make sure that whatever was put there in 2011 still meets our specs.
Okay.
That's one thing you could do. The other thing is I'm always like a little like, oh, really, kind of attitude when you talk about putting it, all that slate, because there's massive amounts of slate there. Putting it in gravel, I think I'd like to have Chick take a look at how that's actually going to happen. And if there's not like, you know, like they wanted to put a gravel driveway here at my house, and they were going to put a tar base down and then put gravel on it. Well, I'm sorry, that doesn't work. That's not pervious. So I'd like some detail on how that gravel
I think
patio.
that gravel was already spoken about in depth back when it was approved, and I'd be willing to comply with whatever they are already approved. They already approved that.
I'm sorry, but that was then, and you're now. So
I guess my confusion with this is, and that's why, like, my client does want to comply, but we're giving back. We're not taking more. We're giving back from the pool, and we're not clearing anything. So I get, we're before you, and so you're going to want us to do, but like, I've never met, can you actually take something away that was already approved? Because it's pervious slate. They are willing to do whatever, if you want plantings but the slate was approved, and they are asking for an unheated, uninhabitable proposed screen room. And they are willing to do and comply with whatever is needed, but to take away from them, they're already giving from the pool to the Screenwood landward. So as far as the harbor committee is concerned, they're encroaching less on that, but to make them remove their slate also seems a little bit.
Well, I don't know what you were proposing, because I thought you were suggesting that they were going to relay that slate because there's concrete there now.
No, actually, it is still set in gravel. He foolishly, in between the slate, because it's pieces, didn't want to see the weeds, so he put gravel. That is what he's telling me. It is still in, I'm sorry, he put cement, so it's still in gravel. He is willing to bring that back to the exact way that it was approved when, for him, he was the owner then.
But
It's not
how are
like
you
it's
gonna
been
get the
passed through owners
concrete
either.
out?
I'm sorry?
How do you get the concrete out?
I'm not a contractor. I don't know that, or a mason worker. I could find out the exact process of that.
Yeah, tell us a story about what the plan is for that.
Okay, I can certainly do that. How are we going to
Thank you.
remove it?
How are they going to get that back to the original approved installation?
I understood. I'll get that answer from them as well.
Okay. All right.
And then hopefully next time I have another half a dozen at least things to work on, and hopefully I'll work that up and we can get a little bit closer to something that it's palatable to you guys. And you know, we certainly want to comply with what you guys want, but he does want his modest screen room with the trade of taking away that pool. And I hope that we can come to some sort of a agreement on something that works for you guys and makes everybody happy. So I'm going to work diligently in the next month to get us there.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you. Have a good evening.
All right. So can I have a motion to table this application until the next meeting, which is when, Doris?
The next meeting is May 5th.
May 5th. May I have a motion, please?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay.
So I see one last application, and then of course we'll have to go back to the discussion item, but the next item I see is at 88 Redwood. Yes.
Correct.
Is there somebody here to speak for the applicant?
Yes, Matt Ivins, and I'm gonna make your night because we are adjourning it.
Oh, good.
Oh, man.
Oh,
Please, I know.
All right.
You don't have to
So
thank me.
Matt, we took a look at what we submitted,
Yep.
and it was like you didn't really get the message. So maybe that's why you're adjourning.
Well, we're hoping for a full board.
Well, that would just be Herb Sample. But yes, you can adjourn. You can wait for Herb to come back.
Okay.
But just, you can also take that message that, from what I understand, you just did some tweaking around the edges, and we really were looking for some real soul searching there on your design.
Mhm.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. All right, may I have a motion to table 88 Redwood until the next meeting, which will be on May 5th?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Second,
Second.
please.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 Okay.
All right. Have a good night.
good night,
Thank you.
Matt.
Good night, you guys.
Good night. So backing up, we have, we did that. Where am I, Doris? We have
We
one
have
last- oh, there it
correspondence
is.
requiring action, section 5.
Right. So who can walk us through this? Is this a Liz Vale thing, or is it a Chick Voorhees thing, or what is this all about?
I can help. Here's a screen share. And what we have here is a subdivision that the planning board is considering. It's a little bit busy, so I'll zoom in on parts. And so it's basically 2 lots, both of which conform, one of which has a number of improvements on it already.
So let me ask you, this is that barn and house over there by Silly Farm.
Yes.
Are they taking those structures down, or are they working with those structures?
I see buildings to be demolished, some. This one's to be demolished. This one is to be demolished. This one is to be demolished.
So they're all being demolished.
And this one, yep, there's a number of them that are all, yep, it looks like every one that I see on here is to be demolished.
So Liz, is that consistent with what you know about this situation?
And
I
these,
think they had to be proposed to be demolished so that they wouldn't increase the degree of nonconformity by the subdivision. Am I right, Chick? Was that in Kathy's report?
yes,
Yeah.
we do have a report on this, but it looks like, residentially zoned land, creating 2 conforming lots. They showed the lots, but they're not developing them at this time. They're just creating them. And their plan would be to develop these with 2 single-family homes. Ultimately, that, as Liz said, will decrease the level of nonconformity, takes off a number of pre-existing nonconforming structures. There is a wetland just to the east, and I had delineated this in 2018. It's mostly Phragmites, and it's not very good quality. It's obviously been impacted over the years, and anything that occurs within the setbacks in the future will have to come before the Harbor Committee. So, recognizing that, I think, is important. They even show a 50-foot buffer, which would conform to the code, and obviously we'd look for extensive restoration. They can't do anything to improve the wetlands themselves because they're not on the property. But when they do come in, we'll pick up this entire jurisdiction area, and we'll be able to get a 50-foot buffer. So I think from that standpoint, as well as the removal of the existing structures, this makes a lot of sense to me. I think the board is generally good with it. You've been asked about lead agency status, and certainly that makes sense for the planning board, and we exchanged some emails to that effect. I will also bring up our report, if you give me a second.
So let me ask you, if you can put that survey back, can you tell me,
Sure.
because
Sorry.
I got a little twisted around, where is Silly Farm? Which is potentially, it's owned by what? The village, Sag Harbor, or Southampton and the county? It's got some park potential. Maybe there's nothing we can do. I'm just wondering where it is in connection to all this.
I am not sure. I can always try and pull up an aerial photograph. Again, you'll have to bear with me a little bit.
Silly
The
Farm
East
should
County land. I'm sorry, Lily, go ahead.
Silly Farm should be to the left in the back of lot proposed 2. Because it's funny, I've been walking by there and looking at the water levels. That's in there, yeah. And then it comes up sort of all in back of further to the left.
Doesn't it face on Long Island Avenue? Am I wrong?
It does. It continues along Long Island Avenue for a good sector.
Right, okay.
And it's very wet and marshy on the other side on that corner of Bay Avenue. There's a constant flood there. I would be curious to see what an actual water test hole looked like.
Yeah, what groundwater is.
Closer in that proposed lot 1. I bet it's pretty high because I know that house on the corner was for sale. Yeah, on the corner of Glover Street. And I just thought this morning looking at it, it's funny walking the dog. Oof, that looks marshy in there.
There is a test hole on lot 2. And in this location, it is 5 feet to water. So
really?
So groundwater is about 5 feet beneath the surface.
And when was that done?
That was done April 9th, 2021. April would typically be a high groundwater month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that should be fairly representative.
So what are the
water
FEMA, like
encounter-
all those houses on Glover Street had to be raised up. What is the FEMA thing? What's the position? How high above groundwater do you have to be? Or how is that? I don't even know what I'm talking about, but what are the rules regarding groundwater and FEMA and elevations?
Well, the elevations pertain to the, assuming it's in an AE zone, and I don't know that for a fact yet. I'm looking at the survey as we talk. It's an AE6 zone. So that means the bottom of the first floor joist needs to be 2 feet above 6, which would be the base flood elevation. So all it means really is, from a building department standpoint, they'll review a structure and make sure that the first floor is set at 8 feet.
Okay.
So that would be 3 feet above the existing grade at this location. And of course, anything that's done here is going to be subject to building permit plot plans, conformance with, all building requirements, as well as FEMA. And again, they'll have to come to the Harbor Committee for any activity within 150 feet. And they'll also need health department approval for any sanitary systems. Those
Right.
IA systems, they may have to elevate them. There may be fill involved, but all of that I would assume, and I think they would design it so it's out of Harbor Committee jurisdiction, and conforms to these typical plot plans. But you're right, vertical aspects of this will be quite important when they go for building permits for homes.
So there's nothing here really to decide, right? I mean, we have, what would be the basis for our saying no? I mean, all we're being asked is to let the planning board be lead agency, right?
We had prepared a memo. This went out a couple of days ago.
Right. I have it here
It's
somewhere.
also it's an LWRP consistency for a proposed minor subdivision. So those, and this actually provides an aerial photograph that shows you the surrounding property, so that's helpful. I meant to bring that up before, but we were looking at the survey.
Okay.
So this is the location. Basically, you know, again, removal of all these pre-existing non-conforming structures, creating 2 lots that conform to zoning, and redeveloping the site in the future in accordance with all current standards and requirements for sanitary systems, building elevations, and wetland setbacks with restoration, in my mind, is a pretty substantial change and a beneficial change. And
Okay.
that's what we did here, was just to, you know, make recognition of those facts and determine that this is consistent with the LWRP, based on the application that's before the planning board. So this is
Okay.
back to the planning board. And again, we can answer any questions, but I think we have a pretty good picture of what's going on. And it also matches what's across the street.
What is across the street?
Well, I can zoom in here on this aerial. You've got the 2 homes across the street on pre-existing lots.
Right.
You've got homes to the south. And of
Right.
course, this is most likely part of the open space.
Right. Right.
At least in terms of privately owned land in the village, you know, removal of the structures, creation of 2 conforming lots, and the ability to regulate wetlands in the future and conform to all building requirements, I think is an improvement. You know, certainly it's a change, but it's beneficial change that conforms with the requirements of the village. And
Okay.
we'll review this in more detail, of course.
Right. Any Harbor Committee members have any questions for Chick or Liz or each other? Any thoughts?
So this memo, and I didn't mean to interrupt, but I didn't hear anyone, dated April 4th, requests that the Harbor Committee provide a recommendation per 275 to allow the application to proceed with their application to the planning, the applicant to proceed. We have a coastal assessment form. We didn't find anything inconsistent. And I think as before, you know, Liz would probably ask to adopt a resolution approving this memo.
Okay. Liz, do you have anything to add to this conversation?
Was that you would be also allowing the planning board to be lead agency, which is appropriate because it's only the subdivision before the board right now, not the individual development.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do I phrase the motion? Can somebody give me some words here? It's a big one. A motion to,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, just to provide a recommendation from the Harbor Committee to the Planning Board, finding this application to be consistent with the LWRP, and also finding no objection to the Planning Board assuming lead agency status for the purpose of seeker.
Perfect.
And that's all in recognition of the April 4th NPV memo.
okay. Do I have to repeat that word for word?
No, no.
Thank you.
You just ask for a
Or has
motion.
it, or it can be pulled from the minutes or
That's
whatever.
perfect.
Okay. May I have a motion to do exactly what Chick just outlined?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Second, please.
Second?
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So I think that's a wrap. I think it's 8 o'clock. I think that we did pretty well considering that we had an embedded presentation of an hour and a half almost. Will, I know that you foiled some materials from, I think it was the DEC, about the sampling and the studying that they've been doing in the water outside of Little Northwest Creek. Next month, could you possibly enlighten us as to what that's all about?
I can try. I gave it to a neighbor of mine, Mike Payne, to help decipher it. I'll try. It wasn't very helpful, I'll tell you that. I foiled back quite a bit, but I will try.
Well, can I ask you one question in regards to that? the last report that I had seen when they did the closure, the shellfish closure, which was, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, there was a recommendation that they do sampling farther out into the bay to see how far the fecal contamination had spread. Do
Yeah.
you know whether they did that further sampling?
Yeah, there is a station. I'll find out specifically what that is, because I think that's my observation is the creek is going to stay contaminated, probably because of the bird life and there's not enough wash. But we're concerned further out, so I'll to your point, Marianne, I'll look into that.
Okay. How many pages is it? Like 500 pages?
It's very difficult to decipher the way the information is, but I'll send you an example and you can go from there. Wasn't easy.
You know, I'm happy to help sift through it.
Okay. I also recommend, I sent it to Steve Williams, and I haven't done it to Sag Harbor Hills, but the Surfrider testing is helpful. It's more frequent than Dr. Gobler's, but it does test for swimmability, let's say.
Right, it's Enterococcus, right.
Yeah, and that's, everybody's been wanting to see that, and I send it to my Nineveh homeowners as soon as I get it, and it's helpful information.
Is that on their website, on the Surfrider website?
It should be. If not, I'll send it to, if you don't get it that way, yeah, it is. So
you can sign up for their weekly newsletter.
Yeah.
And every week it delivers you that info.
Connie posts that to the village website.
Hmm.
So I would think she's doing Little Northwest Creek and Havens and Windmill and whatever else they do. Might be just right on the website.
Steve, I see you there. I sent you an email during this meeting of the testing.
Thank you, because I was going to ask you, when did you send it? I didn't remember.
Yeah, I just sent it, and please share that with your committee, with Azarest.
Sure, I sure will. Thank you very much for that.
Okay, and everybody, I know there'll be another meeting before, but put on your calendars that we're doing a Havens Beach cleanup on Saturday, May 7th from 10:30 to 12:30. And there'll be some flyers and there'll be there'll be a banner down there at the Long Wharf. It's helpful to register ahead of time, and you may go, I don't know, what do I have to register for? Well, it does help for insurance. So if you step on a board with a rusty nail, there's a chance that there'll be insurance to help you out. But if you just sort of walk on onto the beach, that's not the case. So
can I make 2 comments on that? Shannon Richards, who spoke earlier, asking Dr. Gobler a question, had sent that to me and the other presidents of the science communities. And our hesitation, our challenge would have been that we would have been inviting people onto the waterfront property of waterfront owners. So from the mean high tide line up, and we have some very possessive owners on our waterfront. And so we didn't want to do that. I mentioned it to the members, and as the rest asked them to join in the cleanup, but in the areas from Havens Beach and the areas around Little Northwest Creek, but the waterfront areas in front of the waterfront private owners, we didn't feel that we had the appropriate authority to endorse that.
okay. I've been working on this for a while. I don't know that I'm in charge of it. I would hate to think that's the case, but I can't police where people go. So we're going to, direct people to Havens Beach and that place over there by the breakwater, which really catches a lot of the flotsam out of the water. But it's, at some point it's like herding cats. So I don't know what to say.
Is that May 7th, Marianne?
May 7th. Bring your kids. Bring your wife.
I have one other comment, and I shouldn't publicize this, but I will. We have a beautiful probably 10-foot piece of driftwood that was the trunk of a tree that's nicely bleached and it's up on our beach. We're trying to find a creative way to use that. And hopefully your volunteers won't come and pick it up and move it away because it's something we hope to retain.
We're only going to pick up stuff we can put in a trash bag.
Watch Malcolm doesn't get it. He likes to go and chop stuff up, I've noticed.
Okay, well, I'll put some signage up there asking him, please don't move. We'll put that up on May 6th.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And Maria,
Yeah.
hopefully we can get more sifting of the rocks on the beach done. It seems like there's another crop that's risen through the sand there. It's pretty rocky at the moment. And I don't know whether they've done any.
You know what, John, I think that's a great idea. I haven't been down there, but onto the beach, I just sort of do the little dog walk loop. Why don't you send an email to Kate Lacasio?
Okay.
She's sort of the contact to DPW, and ask her if there's anything planned. It would be great if they did it before May 7th.
Okay. Yeah, I have no idea what Dee's schedule is. I mean, we went through that. They did get a machine to sift it, but it's simply getting to that time where people are going to be using the beach more, and especially if you're going to do a cleanup, it'd be nice to have that sifted further.
Yeah, send all that to Kate. And if you want to see me, that's great. But I think, yeah, she's the one to talk to. She's pretty responsive. All right, are we done?
Yeah.
All right.
My dinner's ready,
Okay.
so.
Okay.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Doris.
Liz, you
Thank you
had a
all.
good
Thanks,
meeting tonight to
Doris.
sit in for
Thanks,
Fred.
Chick.
Thanks, Liz.
Thanks, Liz.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
all.
Thanks, Marianne.
Good night.
Hi, Steve.
Have a nice
Thanks,
evening.
Brant.
Marianne, we need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Oh, yes, of course.
I'll move to adjourn the meeting.
I'll
Okay.
second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Good
Aye.
night.
Bye.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye. Take
Bye,
care.
Liz. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Doris.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, John. Good night, Lily.
Actually finishing this from the kitchen where I'm working on dinner.
All right. Have a good night, John.
You can see that I'm in the kitchen.
Enjoy.